Welcome everybody to MogTalk episode 224. Today is March 3rd, March 20th, 2021. I'm Frosty, and this is MogTalk. If you have never seen MogTalk before, it's a show based around the Final Fantasy XIV community discussing everything from Savage Raiding to Chocobo Racing. Today is going to be about Deep Dungeon. Before we go too much further in it, of course, I want the guest to introduce himself so you know who's on the show. We'll start with Angelus. Angelus, can you tell everybody who you are?
Hello, I'm Angelus Demonus. I've been streaming Deep Dungeon for like 2.5 years, and we recently got Twitch partner because of it, so have a little bit of time in there, so that's me.
Congrats, man. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, and then I mean, even if you even watch anything about Deep Dungeon scene, you know Angelus, I'm pretty sure. I think he's pretty much carried the scene for the last couple of years and built it, so congratulations on that too.
Thanks.
And then, of course, we have some other random person who I thought was on the show before, but apparently not. Like, I guess it's just like me remembering inviting him and him declining me, but me forgetting that he declined me. Ferro, can you tell everybody who you are?
Yeah, and we met at a FurCon, so I don't know why you don't remember me. I'm Ferro. I started streaming raids with Ultimate and Deep Dungeon, so it's always been a very important part of my content. Every content drought, I do lots of Deep Dungeon. I've recently gotten back into it. Thanks for having me finally, after not answering my calls or anything.
Damn.
Yes, well, I mean, like, you're a little bit of a weirdo, dude. When I see it, I'm like, I don't know if I want to get into that kind of conversation right now, and I just kind of keep going. But, yeah. No. I'm happy I could get you on, man. But this is something that has been interesting to see evolve over the last couple of years, because Deep Dungeon, they didn't really do anything this expansion at all for Deep Dungeon, and even without them adding new content to it, it seems like activity has grown with Deep Dungeon, and we're talking about, of course, Heaven on High and Palace of the Dead. I'd like to ask both of you first, before we go too much into it. You both seem to be very interested in it. Why do you have such a attraction to this content? And I'll start with Angelus. I'll let you lead here.
Well, originally I got into it because when it first released in Palace, it had the leaderboard, it had a high score, it had and especially the solo leaderboard. So I already knew like you can do solo from the beginning, so that was something that was just interesting to try. And the competitive feel of it kept me going on the content, and I just kept going because then you do it in one job, you felt like you wanted to try in other jobs, and that kind of consumed a lot of time and lots and weeks and stuff. So it just kept me engaged for a long period of time. So that's what it kind of kept me going from the beginning and all the way up until now, especially that we're seeing the clears happening on all the other jobs and everything. So that's one reason that I keep doing it. And there's still like a long list of things that I'd still like to do with the content on solo. So,
okay. Yeah. I remember, when you were doing PvP a lot more often, was that kind of the same thing too? They introduced a leaderboard towards it and you wanted to get higher in a leaderboard?
I mean, with PvP, I was interested in the content in general. Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't do too much for the first season of Feast, but yeah, as we started to get a little bit better, I started to get more involved with it. But yeah, the competitive feel is part of that too, for sure. So.
Okay. Ferro, what brings you into Deep Dungeon? Why do you want to keep doing it?
There's a lot of reasons.
Okay.
Not even touching on how I've started becoming addicted to soloing it after learning from Angelus. It's a great way. I always recommend it for new players if they want to test a job. The moment you take a job, not a class, into a palace, you get level 60. You get to play with it. So when it was new, I did that to test different jobs and see how they played. And if you don't like how a job plays at 30, you just level it up in there until it's a higher, and then you don't have to play with its boring kit. Mm-hmm. You get XP. You can have a party of 4 different leveled players as long as it's relevant and not too high. The XP scales with you. It double scales on a double XP server, which is crazy. If you bring a max level in there who's helping his friends level, they get tomes out of every floor. You get a chance at huge amounts of gil. And although it's not as efficient with speed-wise to go to the max floors, it's, in my opinion, the most fun way to do content for levels or tomes or gil while still getting rewarded for it. So I get addicted to that. I think it's really fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, you also do a lot of it with groups on stream too. I mean, do you like the group dynamic of it?
Oh yeah, if it gets too easy with a tank healer and 2 DPS, you just go 3 DPS, and then you go 4 DPS, and you just start using your skills to just do it faster, and it's more risky, and it's crazy. It's very addictive when you start getting into it, even though it might seem boring, because some of the Shadowbringer jobs, so in Stormblood I didn't really have this opinion entirely. Some of the Shadowbringer jobs are really bursty and just melt things in there now. I got addicted to Machinist. Machinist wasn't this bursty in Stormblood, so I went in there. I was like, "Whoa, this is actually really fun, just blowing things up." And then you get to the higher floors, and then it's really intense, and you have to know how to kite. And there's actually a lot of technical aspects to each job, kiting and timing things. And it's the more you learn about it, the more you realize it's kind of like learning Raid from scratch. There's a lot that goes into it.
Okay. I mean, and there's also, besides you two, there's been like a pretty big surge in player interest with Deep Dungeon that we've started to notice. There's a handful of streamers who, like, that's their only content, and that's all they do now, and they make it basically the feature of their stream. Why is there such a high interest in it? Is it because of the reasons you said, or is it just fun to watch, or what?
You want me or Angelus to go first?
I'm going to let you guys start battling out. You know, whoever talks first
You
wins.
can go first.
Well, the first way you get people in there is it's convenient. It's gil, it's XP, it's all that stuff I mentioned previously. Mm-hmm. But once you start getting to the higher floors, you realize there is no dungeon content in the game that is actually that scary or challenging, or, you know, you get one shot by every mob. Their cleaves are like 2 rooms long, so you need to be ready to LOS. You need to know what things do. You need to rotate silences and stuff. It's not hard once you learn it, but it's really exciting for a new player to actually do that climb. It's not as intimidating as, say, getting into Savage raiding or something if they're not a raider. So I've had success getting people that aren't even Savage raiders into doing Deep Dungeon. They have a blast every time.
Okay, just because it's like just that mild, challenging content with small scale is what you're thinking?
Well, it's for them, it could be really challenging. I mean, it's scary. You need to know how to save a run when it goes wrong. You lose your run in a blip if something goes wrong and you make the wrong decision. So it's pretty exciting. It's the only thing close to a dungeon crawl in this game. Dungeons are normally linear and they're pretty comfy, and it doesn't matter if you die. These are like almost give me a feeling of going through an old dungeon where you got to commit 6 hours to it, and you're crawling and you're going deeper and deeper for that loot. The mobs get harder and harder, and you kind of need to know what everything does. You actually tank in this dungeon. You need to know what to pull, where to pull, why to pull it, pull back, you know. So you could have a Savage tank in there that, you know, maybe they're experienced, but they don't know how to tank a proper dungeon, like an MMO dungeon, and that kind of that in there, which is fun.
Now that you mentioned that, it kind of reminds me back in the day when Burning Crusade came out, and it with WoW, where we were all like marking each mob, and you're like, okay, sheep this one, do this to this one, trap this one, and like every pool you had it kind of calculated about who's going to do what to CC things, so you can have an optimal pool on there instead of just running wall to wall. And I guess that's kind of what this dungeon is providing right now, is that you have to be kind of tactical about your engagements.
Exactly. You got to think about what you're engaging, what you can CC, what CC works on what, how you're going to react. What if you're fighting something that has an enrage and 3 mobs walk around the corner? How are you going to handle that, you know? You've got Palmanders, too, which really changes up this content. I love the Palmander system, and you've got to learn how to use those. And the fact that it's all procedurally generated, the mobs are procedurally generated as far as I know. You get a set every 3 floors, but where they're going to be, how many there are, what rooms they're going to be, and what treasure you get, and how many rooms is all procedurally generated that you can influence with Palmanders, but that makes it a new experience each time.
Okay. Angelus, your thoughts on maybe a lot of people coming here? Do you think it's mostly the challenge, or what's your opinion?
I think it's a challenge. I mean, what Ferro said is kind of the in the middle, I believe, of like, once someone gets into it, they start realizing all of these details. I think on my end, what I see is, like, even if it's a brand new person, they'll just be like, hey, why are you doing this? And then it's just a simple, well, like, hey, there's this leaderboard that exists that makes it a little competitive. There's this super rare title that on the solo route that not a lot of people have, relatively speaking. But then the hardest part is just getting the person in there. I think once they step in, then they realize everything, kind of what Ferro said of like, you get all these tactical, all the strats and everything. And it probably hooks people just at least to think get in there. I mean, there's a lot of people who talk about they want to try it, or they look at it, oh, it's really hard. But I would definitely say a vast majority of people that I see that just actually really just step in there, even solo party, they start to realize all these things that either they're watching on the stream or that's being explained to them. And then that's why people get to it. And then I've seen stories of people saying like they did it themselves and they start convincing their FC members to give it a shot, and then they get addicted too. So it's mostly that. It's really like it's almost definitely just a word of mouth thing, almost, at least of the initial base of it. And I guess getting more people watching it as well kind of adds to that as well. So it's early on, it was definitely something that a lot of people just didn't know kind of existed in the game, but more people are getting to know about it. And I think that's why it's just kind of snowballing to that, just more and more people just giving it a shot. And I guess in this situation where I guess people are maybe wanting to still play 14 and finding other things to do, that they kind of land into this. Achievement hunters land into this. I've seen that too. They're just rolling down the achievements. They're like, oh, Palace of Dead solo, oh, Heaven on High Soul, let's see what this is all about. And then they jump in, and then that's how they kind of get caught up too. So, yeah.
I mean, and there aren't really that many people talking about the solo side. There's not that many necromancers out there still, right? How many necromancers are there?
It's probably creeping closer to 500, if not just under 600 or something like that total, and in all data centers combined. So
yeah, like or globally, there's only that many. I remember when the first necromancer happened. That was like almost a year after the content came out, wasn't it?
About. I mean, I guess you can roughly say a number of months after Stormblood came out, because it was on Red Mage.
Yeah.
So it couldn't even be done. Well, I guess it theoretically could have been done before then, but Red Mage was the one to take care of it. But that was after Stormblood. So.
Yeah, and that was pretty crazy to see that. And then we start to see like a lot of people, more people starting to be interested in doing it because they saw it could be possible to do it.
Right.
And so I guess the community-wise, how much has the community grown actually within the last couple of years? Has it been like maybe 200%, 300%, or like what are we looking at?
So when I said I was streaming this for like 2.5 years, I got Necromancer in March of 2019, and I was the 14th in the world to get it. So since then, in about like a year or a half, almost 2 years, we're talking an additional 500 people that have gotten it since its release. And even Lone Hero, that was in 2018, the end of 2018. So you're talking about 2.5 years, and that's jumped probably closer to 600 people solo. I mean, yeah, people have also done it on multiple jobs, which has also been an interesting thing to see too. But yeah, it's been a pretty exponential rise in terms of just people trying it and accomplishing it, etc. And I think also the Shadowbringer job changes probably aided in that as well. I think a lot of that kind of helped in maybe assisting in the possibilities of other jobs doing it. So that probably all contributed into it.
Okay. And so is there like a fierce competition kind of out there between some of the top people who do it, trying to get the clears faster or anything like that?
I mean, at this current juncture, not necessarily I don't know, fierce competition of just getting the clears themselves. There's been a little bit of a back and forth of the high scores, though. Kind of like just looking at the leaderboard and just seeing what someone gets. That has definitely been a thing I've seen from just a handful of people, because that part is very difficult. But yeah, there is a little bit of back and forth between NA and JP for a little bit, which is kind of fun to watch. But yeah, just mostly in the high score valley, not so much the actual just clear itself. Okay. So
yeah, isn't the high score kind of, you have to do some goofy stuff to try to get the high score? Like it's like there's some way it values your score overall that's not like the most efficient way to clear it or the fastest way to clear it. There's just a way you have to work the system.
Yeah, we recently, like maybe a year and a half ago, we had a community member who dove down and really broke down every little piece that could contribute to score, and now we kind of know almost everything that comes down to what adds to your score. And so now what you're having is people trying to figure out the optimized route of scoring. So it does get a little weird. Like you purposely step on traps, you purposely do a full lockout to kill everything as much as possible. It gets really funky when it comes to high score, and it really changes a regular run completely, because you play it completely different because you want to maximize everything that it gets involved with adding to your score. So it's pretty wild.
Okay. Ferro, do you have any interest in ever going for high scores or anything like that?
I'll think about that after I actually solo it. I'm working on that right now. It's painful. It's actually really hard.
What's your current solo setup?
I died on 91 the other day.
91. Are you doing red mage?
I'm doing machinist.
Okay. Okay.
I have to practice LOSing, which is something you have to do for solo, which is there's these mobs on 91, white mages. They're supposed to be the easiest mobs on those floors as far as I know. And they have a 1 second cast time, so you have to get into a rhythm of LOSing them so that you don't get blown up, and I failed it and I got blown up on the first mob on 91.
Okay.
So it's just normal. It's just you learn these new things you have to practice. It's really weird that you don't have to do anywhere else in the whole game.
Are you doing machinist because you want to, or I think isn't red mage supposed to still be the one that is like the easiest one to get your first clear on?
There's nothing more fun than reassemble drill.
Fair.
It's a nuke. While you're running away and flipping through the air, you just reassemble drill. I don't know why.
No, yeah.
I agree.
I gotcha.
Ninja looks really fun too, though. I used to do red mage a lot, but I just love having a slow. And you use your CC in there a lot. CC is very important in there. It's not important in almost any other content in the game. But your CC of a job seems to be really important in there. Like hide on a ninja is actually used to hide.
Right?
It's not used to just get your mudras, you know?
So, I guess, what would be the easiest... Is red mage the easiest one to clear on? If you wanted to get your first solo?
I don't think so.
No?
No.
Okay. Then what is the easiest one to clear on?
Well, I always say the easiest. If you want to go objectively, you want to look at the boards, the leaderboards, and just see which has the most clears, because that just tells you what people are gravitating towards. I always suggest to people to at least try what they think is their main job first, because you just might find that a lot better for you. Like, for someone may just look at machinists, and Ferris said he likes jumping around. Someone just be like, yeah, I don't like that, and I don't like shooting guns, and they'll just do something else. You can't. It's almost like you don't want to force someone into a job that they just whatever reason they just don't like, and that no longer becomes the easiest for them. They're just like, biting their tongue, just going through it because someone told them that was the easiest, even though it would have the most clears. But yeah, like objectively, Heaven on High would be Gunbreaker because it just has by far the most clears, way more than even Red Mage now. And then Machinist would have the most clears now for POTD. But the knee jerk is Red Mage because that was the one that first cleared, and that's what we all did initially. Mm-hmm. It's just now that people have seen, evidence that you can do it on other jobs, they see how the gameplay goes, and like, oh yeah, that can do that. And then they try it, and then they find out that actually is easier for them to go for.
Okay. I mean, has that been like a kind of an effect from expansions coming out and job skills changing? I'm assuming that might have shifted that around a little bit, or
yeah, tanks were probably the biggest one. Once you got rid of tanks, the tank stance and the offensive stance, and just kind of combined it into one, that really streamlined tanks big time. It was still doable prior to, but it's just way better now. I think Ninja, I don't remember how Ninja was prior to Shadowbringers, but right now its current iteration is beautiful in Deep Dungeon. It feels like it's meant for Deep Dungeon, the way it's set up right now. So it really does. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, I think a lot of jobs did benefit off that scenario, except I guess healers. Healers probably suffered a little bit from the change because they just lost DPS. So
yeah. Okay. So when you're going through this and you're trying to get a clear and everything else, how much of this is really just based off RNG?
It's interesting because I remember when I was first doing Palace on Red Mage, my initial attempts, I always thought the RNG was too much. I always thought it was just too much there, like you didn't get stuff back. I was just getting stuck on like the 180s and stuff, and I was getting frustrated and all that stuff. And then I took a break for like a while until Heaven on High came out. And then I got the Heaven on High clear, and I came back to Palace, like I guess, what is that, maybe a year and a half after I first attempted it, and we started to get consistency into the really high floors. So there is RNG that plays into it, but I feel like getting into the higher floors, 180, 190, getting to like 80, 91 Heaven on High, that doesn't happen by accident. Like RNG doesn't all of a sudden dictate that you'll just stop at like 60 and then one day you'll just get up to 90. You'll start to see that there is a consistency that kicks in because you've just gotten better, your skills are better. I mean, the end of the run can still be kind of determined by a little bit of RNG or a lot of bit of RNG, but you don't get to those higher floors by accident. You will work your way with skill to get there, and then you'll just see what the game kind of gives you thereafter. So it's not a large amount of RNG. It does play a role into it, but not in the sense that, like, you know, someone can go in there and say, oh, you won because of luck. Like that's not definitely the case. You don't win because you got lucky. You won because you played really well to give you the chance to have what you need to clear. So
okay.
If you put someone that's not very good at soloing and they have the best RNG ever against someone that's an experienced soloer with bad RNG, the experienced soloer is going to win. Good players know how to play around RNG.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big part of it I've been trying to learn is you play around the RNG and you have ways of dealing with it. You have very specific situations where you just know how to do something. Right. And it's actually way bigger learning curve than I thought. It's not impossible, but I mean, Angelus makes it look easy soloing, but I've run into situations where I'm like, I've never seen this before. You know, do you want to, if you get a damage down on a floor, do you want to sacrifice a palm to make it faster so you don't lose time? Little things like that. Just if you find a room that's flooded with 1 million enemies, should you sacrifice a palm? Should you just pull really fast? There's a bunch of the floor modifiers really make swap it up a lot in there. You can get, I don't know if there's a limit on how many glooms you can get in a row, but I feel like I've had some runs where it's just gloom, 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 which is damage up, strength up, and speed. So they're like just blowing you up if you don't use anything. And knowing how to deal with those and get through it. I watched Angelus like a couple weeks ago. He had a floor 91 that was awful RNG. Took him 30 minutes on one floor. He still made it to 99 and almost cleared.
Okay.
So there's a lot of tech to it and a lot of improvement. Like
go ahead.
It's been nice to stream it because soloers have been tuning in and they're like, in a nice way, they're not being mean because I allow backseating when I'm doing it. They're like, you could do this, this, and this, or why did you do this? I recommend doing this next time. And I'm like, I didn't even think of that. I was just hitting buttons. I didn't even think about, measuring, what is the chance of this? What is the chance of that? It's like playing a card game or something. It's not bad RNG. It's pretty fair. Yeah, you can get really screwed, but there's a lot of learning to play around that is really fun.
And there's only a handful of things in Deep Dungeon in general, whether it's solo or party, that are just rules. Like, you just don't do this because it will kill you. But outside of that, a vast majority of ideas and thoughts and strategies are essentially percentage chances. Like, hey, you could have used this thing, but it still didn't guarantee that it would have given you success floors later or floor before. And so that's why it's interesting with chat as well that people like say things and propose things, but it doesn't have that feel of like a literal backseat of like someone giving you a spoiler or anything. It's just it for me, it just becomes this debate. Like, I would look at it and like I think about what they said, and then it becomes this kind of process of, well, this is why I wouldn't do it, this is why I would do it. And it's interesting to go through that thought process, because sometimes it does then produce a thought that, oh, actually that might have been a great idea. But again, it's not. It doesn't feel like someone is just literally telling you the answer. It's just like, well, there's a reason why I'm not doing what you're doing. But it still doesn't mean you're wrong, and it could mean that I'm wrong. But you're just dealing with percentages. It's just like, it just depends on what you decide and what the gamble is and what you think would give you the better success. And that's, in my opinion, that's what makes it a ton of fun too.
Okay. Something I've learned really fast doing this is sometimes you need to take big risks, and that, if people know what's going on, can be really intense in your run, especially if you're watching someone do it. Taking a huge risk to do something and you don't know if it's going to work out or not, and you don't really know what you're going to get, which is why I find it really entertaining to watch, because you see there's so many things you can deal with in a full run. But yeah, the community is really helpful. I actually really like the community so far. I think the Deep Dungeon community has like 2,000 people in it or something, the Discord.
Yeah, one of the bigger Discords has like 2-3K on it.
Okay.
Yeah, across 6 data centers.
That's pretty awesome. So I mean, like, you don't have like horrible drama back there where people are like, I fucking hate this guy. He only got there because he cheesed his way to the top. Nothing like that.
No, like it's like, I mean, everyone's kind of on their own adventure. So it's whatever I do really has no effect on what the other person does. I mean, I guess in my end, Ferro's end, you're watching us do it, so I guess in theory it maybe have some slight effect, but in essence, my run is just not going to be your run. It's just going to be a completely different run. We both enter at the same time. We're going to have completely different runs. So whatever I decide would have essentially no effect on whatever the other person does. So that's why I think it's really separated in that. Yeah, you compete against each other because of that leaderboard with the high scores and stuff, but it's still very RNG in that factor. You just won't get the same run at all. So it's difficult to just be like, just kind of like jab at someone because it's just not the same. You're not just doing a one-to-one comparison.
It's not like clearing an ultimate and then 10 people say, "Oh, you got carried" or something. This is seen pretty differently.
Okay.
And they're pretty helpful. I really like the community so far.
That's good. That's good. I don't know. I never related any kind of toxicity that might exist there in that community, but maybe one day. You hit too many people in a community, eventually you're gonna have some really shitty people in a corner throwing shade to shit the entire time. But
true, but this goes for like 1v1 stuff. Like you can have someone toxic, but if they're not doing well, they only have themselves to blame. And I think that filters more people out because it's like you can blame the server and you can blame this and that, but everyone knows you just, you're doing that. You can't blame your teammates in 1v1 solo Palace of the Dead or HOH. There's no one to blame except yourself. You can blame the RNG, but you can only do that for so long.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about like player skill in general for going into this content. If someone was getting in there, what are some of the things they could learn and know how to do to have a more successful run? Either one, Heaven and High or Palace of the
Dead. You need to arm up. So you need the in-game mode gear leveled up initially. And the hard one is getting also the regen potions, both in Palace and Heaven on High. Getting the sustaining and Empyrean. That usually is the little bit more of the annoying part because you have to have a large stock to even consider going far in a solo. Because if you just run out, then you're probably just going to die because you just need those potions running almost the entire time. Outside of that, it just becomes just learning the game mode, progging it, understanding the mechanics, and just getting in there and just trying it out. So,
okay,
if you're bringing in 4 people, I've had people with 0 ether armor clear it. If you have an experienced player to guide them. I've heard a lot of horror stories of people trying to pug to 100 HOH and Palace of the Dead 200. I pugged and it went great, but I was in Discord and we were working it out and stuff. And there's like guidelines that if you follow the guidelines, you don't really need to know what anything does. You just need to be prepared. What happens if everyone's wiping? You're going to do this. If you can't do that, you do this, Don't run around and sprint into the middle of rooms on floor 71 in HOH because if you hit a luring trap on one of those floors, it's going to be very painful, I've heard of people pretending traps don't exist. They don't know that you hug the wall. People think I've heard people say it takes way too long to get your ether pool up. Well, your ether pool, if you're just doing the checkpoint and doing those 10 floors, even if you don't get every silver chest, if you just grab them when you bypass them, you can get that way up. Once it turns yellow, I believe the chance of a silver upgrading your ether armor or weapon goes down. Once that happens, I'm like, you're ready. Let's go to max level. But it doesn't even have to be that high. The other day I think I was 71.65, and I was 99.99 by the end of it. We just spent the extra time to grab the silvers on our way up.
Yeah, I think with an experienced player, it kind of helps out too. I think if you go in with literally, like, say, 4 people that are completely new, you may want to have a little bit of background legwork. I don't know, Ferro, if you've ever taken in someone with, like, literally 0-0, but I think I went in one time on one of my alt characters with, like, I think, like, 10-10, and I think I got up to Heaven on High, the 80 boss, and he was, like, one-shotting me because of the AoE, because it was so low. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Guess I need a little bit. But then I was running with people who knew what they were doing, so that was okay with me. And the group was okay with that. But it was interesting to see kind of the output of damage with low armor. But if you're not running with people, at least 1 or 2 people who know what they're doing, it could get a little treacherous if literally none of you are geared up inside the game mode.
I would say if you have the time, though, that is actually really fun to prog it blind.
Yes.
I progged Palace with a guide. But when HOH hit, I had a friend and I sat outside of the entrance and Slash shouted and said, "Looking for a couple gamers to do this. We might use Discord. Have like 12 hours free. Preferably have some Savage experience so you know what you're getting into." We got in Discord. I made 2 good friends that day. It was a blast. We just went all day until we cleared.
Wow.
And it brought me back because there's not a lot of content in this game. This is actually an issue that's in the game in general. I won't get too deep into it, but this game has a lot of matchmaking content, so people don't know how to network or socialize or say, "Hey guys," I've literally shouted in Limsa before when a queue dies and I get people together. They don't know how to just say, "Hey, who wants to do this?" Just to a bunch of strangers and be like, "Let's see what happens. Let's go. Let's go on an adventure." I have very fond memories of blind running HOH when it hit. That was one of my biggest disappointments of no Deep Dungeon. This expansion was it's a trip to go in there blind when it first comes out, seeing the giant roamers and all these new things. You don't know what's going on. SE puts a lot of work into those things.
Yep, absolutely. It's you just look at something and you just don't know if it's going to just obliterate you, but you have to try it because you have no other option. That was the fun part of progging initially. We have a lot of guides now, but back when we were first doing it, we had no one to go to. We just had to literally just look at it and be like, "Oh, see what happens," and then there's your information right in front of you. So that's a lot of fun doing it.
I can't stress enough how scary it is when you're fighting a mob and it stays alive and it does a new cast and you don't know what it is.
Yep.
Like when I first saw a Griffin cast Winds of Winter, which obliterates everyone around it pretty much. I was like, "What's Winds of Winter?" And then our tank, I just said, "Pop hollowed." He hollowed. We all died except him. There's just these unique moments where you just don't know what's there. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like doing the BA or the 48-man Savage blind, where people don't know what's going on. It's just really scary because it's so punishing if you wipe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, it does edge on that kind of. You don't know until you know, so it's like gotcha stuff, and so it feels, if you're going in there, you can't like use a lot of skill to figure out like stuff that you haven't experienced with. I mean, it does take it's a part of it, but I mean, like in the end, you don't know if something is going to happen until you experience it, and if it just instantly kills you, there's no way for you to recover. So there is that side of it.
You think about that and you counter it, right? So, for example, if you don't know what something does on a high floor, send your tank at it, stand really far away, and watch what it does, and have him just hit his cooldowns. And if you see a nuclear bomb go off in that direction, then you know that you need to kill it fast after a while. That's what I did blind. Was you use common sense. If you know that there's stuff that enrages, if you know there's things with ridiculous range cleaves. Gazes, you have an idea of all the mechanics in the game, all the basic mechanics. You play around them and you outrange the mobs. You stand around a corner, you let someone just test and see what it does. That's what you do in actual prog too. People did that in the 48-man also. They sent us a light party in to just test the boss and see what it did and see the mechanics. So if you use common sense, you don't stick 4 people on top of each other on a new mob, and then you can prog it blind.
Okay. And by the way, it's unguided, right? Or guideless. That's the term, right? Or because we're changing that terminology, right? Ferro?
Oh, well, I forgot.
It's a hard one. It's a real hard one for me, man. That's like one of the hardest ones that I have. But I'm trying.
They took a tag away. People know what I mean.
Yeah.
People know I'm not being insensitive. I guess I'm just trusting people to not take my words into the wrong context.
I wish. But anyways, that's one of the ones that I've been trying to work around, because there's no
unguided means you still could. I mean,
first experience. No, I don't know. It's such a difficult word to play in the MMO world.
Maybe
dev.
Huh?
No
maybe
hand
dev, or I don't know.
LOS run.
No hand holding. LOS line of sight run.
Yeah.
Okay. So unguided, don't know what's going on.
Yeah. All that stuff. But I get it. I think that is where a lot of fun comes in for most people who play this game that want to be like kind of on the edge of everything. And And it's one of those situations to where figuring out that puzzle's off. For example, E12S, P2 is so much easier than P1 if you know it, right? And so getting that challenge and being able to take that in is such a wonderful experience if you could find other people to go through it with you. And you can't really do that in Savage Raiding past week 1. I think most people right now, you could probably get 4 people together, be like, oh, I don't know anything about it, and jump in there and have that experience together. Because go ahead.
I would encourage people to, if they haven't done Deep Dungeon, to just get 3 friends and just try it completely unguided and just go in there, because all you need to do is have a tank, a healer, a couple DPS, maybe one that can raise, stay generally spread out, be ready to LOS things, have your Palmanders ready, witching if something's enraging, you know. There's re-raisers in there. You use them at high levels. It auto-raises someone if they die. That's what you use for prog. And it's really fun if you if you unguided run that content.
We just gotta work on it, Ferro. I won't go into it. I guess that's a whole nother topic. It is a lot of stuff that we don't think about that apparently it exists somewhere. And I don't know if that was ever something that anyone ever really was offended by. It's just, I think, a growth that people are trying to push for. I don't know. I'm trying my best. But anyways, back to this. So learning the whole experience of going in there and just, I think the main message is to get in there and do it and kind of see what it's like. And then you'll start being able to get an idea of what you need to learn and do. You get that through experience. It's a little bit much to focus on what you need to learn before you even experience it.
Just get in there. That's all it is. Get in there.
Sorry.
Okay.
I think what does lose people is they get bored of the lower floors and they don't go fast enough. And they don't know that once you have high ether pool, high ether armor, you can split everyone up, scour rooms, healers everyone can solo. If someone dies, okay, you learned a lesson. Go raise them real quick and then keep going. And especially for Palace of the Dead, if you take a long time on every 10 floors in Palace, it's going to take you ages to get to the more interesting floors for 4 players. You don't even need 4 people in there. You could trio it. I've taken some people their first time trio. I did a 3 scholar one runs just for fun, and it worked. You can make it work. You can be creative. You can. It's very wide open content that you can clear. You do have precautions. If you're doing really high floors without a tank, you should probably have a bunch of Empyrean potions, which is very valuable. I'm glad they added those to Palace because it started without them. So, you get pot shards, so you grab brown chests and you get the pot shards, you get those, and then you can go without a tank if you want. You can change roles every time you attempt it. Oh, I want to play this job now. I'll do this one. Have fun, And I lost my train of thought.
No, it's fine. But I mean, where we're kind of going here is that, I think that's interesting what you said about the whole them going in and splitting up. If someone gets killed by stuff, does it stay aggroed on your party, or is it only on that one person?
It's just on them. Aggro is not it's not like a raid. It's like a dungeon where if someone aggroes something, you don't do any heals. This is how you test stuff blind. This is how you test stuff guideless at the high floors. Is you do that. You send a guinea pig. This is actually, most people who have encountered this content probably just grinded the checkpoint, which I think is, and I'm saying this after having done it for years, probably some of the most boring content in the entire game. To just endlessly do those 10 easy floors over and over and over again. And I think they don't really know how much fun the content can be if they go to the higher floors. Before I even knew about those higher floors, I just assumed it was just as easy all the way to the end. I didn't know it actually turned into 4-man Savage Light as you got to the higher stuff. And if you do those queues, you'll see there's people that if you have a gamer party, they'll all split. I've seen this on Elemental a lot. You'll have 3 machinists and they all split up and every floor has to be done in 50 seconds. And And then you'll get a party. I saw these more on other data centers where everyone is clearing every mob in possibly sight. Every floor is taking, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, and people start fighting each other and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Speed is generally makes it more tolerable. I'm not going to get into, if you should be mean or not to people. I'm generally in the middle. I'm generally neutral, but you grab silvers for people and stuff in there, and you split up, and they split up because it's fast. And if you treat your climb like that to a degree, once you start seeing things auto and obliterate you and stuff, you're gonna go, okay, let's slow down, let's do duos, or let's stay as a light party together because this stuff is hitting like a truck. And then you just learn as you go, and that's how you do it.
Okay.
It's more tolerable. You can't do it really slow in the easy floors.
No, yeah, I get that. Okay, so Angelus, you've been doing this for a while. So
Sure.
over the time that you've been doing it, what are some things that, maybe big discoveries? You know how speedrunners, like, they're going through content that something new gets discovered and it, like, completely changes, like, routing and everything else they do. Has there been anything like that for any of the Deep Dungeon?
I think initially when we were just doing just red mage only, I think the people who were brave enough to try the other jobs just started to open the door. Because I think with this content in particular, I mean, if you see like basically actual evidence of someone doing it on something, that you kind of run with it and you're like, oh, I guess it's doable. And that's what took a while for Red Mage too, because it was essentially impossible until someone just did it, and then you started to see that kind of snowball of people just, oh, okay, well, Red Mage pulled it off, let's all do it on Red Mage. But then you started to see people being brave enough to try other jobs, and you started to see that wall start to break, and it opened up all of these new possibilities. So that was definitely one of the bigger ones, because unless someone actually just gone out and tried it, everyone would just say, no, it's impossible because it hasn't been done yet. Until now, when you have literally every job that cleared it. And I think the other one was the discovery of the high score, because that was such a huge mystery for a long time. Because dude, they never told us anything about how to do score. A lot of it was a pure mystery. You would just get at the scorecard, you would just get your kill count and then a score. You made assumptions. Like I assumed, like intuition, getting the yellow beam on the ground gave you points. There was like a halfway thing that I was thinking like, okay, maybe if you go fast or something, but that seemed inconsistent. And then when the community member figured out all these little details, you started to see how insane the amount of things were that you could do that can open the score. And I remember when he showed up and posted that I had a conversation with him on Twitter. He posted in my chat, and we had someone who's really, really good at solo give it a shot and immediately saw results. We're like, oh crap, this is real. And it's incredible because you have, on the surface, you think you just get a lot of kills and you go, but you wouldn't think of actually doing a literal speed run. You get extra points. Stepping on traps, you lose points. Opening chests, doing certain other things. In that respect, all gets points. Getting to all of the rooms in the map gives you points. Like all of these little tiny details that all come into it. And then you get into this process of actually optimizing a high score run. And like I said earlier, that completely changes your entire run. Even if you're doing it in a party or solo, you approach it completely differently. It becomes like just an optimized run because everything matters. Every time, every second you step in there will matter because you have to maximize your time. You have to maximize how many kills there are. You have to make sure you kill the boss in time if you're going to do the speed run. So that was kind of, I would say, revolutionary because now now you have a section of people who are just focusing on the clear. I just want the title. I'm good to go. And then you have another facet of people who are like, no, I'm going to go in there like dozens and dozens of times trying to up my score. Just getting, and in that fashion, like a clear is not even like important. Like, oh, I got the clear, but what's my score? That's all I care about. It's like, it's almost like you've gone beyond this whole thing of I just want a title clear. You're already assuming you get a clear. You just hope you get a high score. There's the competition part of it.
It sounds kind of like FF logs.
In a sense, yeah.
You start going for those logs and hiring your score.
The only like officially supported like ranking, I guess you could say, outside of PvP. So you got to figure out how to work. I mean, they have ranking for. I haven't visited Lone's
crafting
in a while. They have ranking for grand companies, or not grand companies, PvP with front lines. They have ranking for that, right? Then free companies too. Which I never understood how any of that really worked. And do people actually go for those rankings? Complete tangent.
I don't know.
I mean, when you look at it, sometimes it kind of looks like they do. Some of those like Grand Company seals per week are. I don't even know how it's possible. Like what, like 2 million, 3 million? I don't even know how you can create that much in a week, but it seems like it, kind of.
That's crazy. But this one actually feels like there's something like substance to it. Like you have to try an achievement. And it's a solo thing. It's the only thing that you could really do as solo and be on a scoreboard, right?
Well, there's like 2 feet. Well, initially there's kind of two thoughts to it. First was just getting the clear because in the early days, getting a clear was just, I mean, you're on the board, period. But it also gives you the date and time of which you got it. So that gives you almost like this evidence of like, here, this is when I did it. And you know, in the early times, you would also be like the evidence of like, oh, I was like this person that cleared it in this date, and that would be kind of irrefutable because you just look at all the dates and you just be like, oh, that's the one that's the oldest date. But now it's starting to become, it is starting to evolve into a high score because certain jobs, the top, like it shows the top 25 of each job. Mm-hmm. Certain jobs, the top 25 are all clears. So if you want to get your name on the board, you just have to get a high score, and that's gonna, I think, be something that will start to show up in the future because people will look at it. You know, they'll get their clear, but then they're gonna like, oh, I didn't make it to the board. How do I get on the board? And then you start investigating. Oh, I got to get the high score. So if that matters to you, that might become something that is your goal to actually do that. So.
That's exciting.
I think going for, if I can get people interested, I think going for 4-player scores might be fun someday as well.
See, this is the thing that I wish they did, though. Is I hope they do, is that they separate the duo, the trio, and the 4-man, because it's all clumped into this party. Yeah. And from my understanding, if you're gonna go for a high score party, it has to be a 2-man. You cannot.
Really?
Yeah, it has to be. There is a multiplier that kicks in with the amount of people that you have. So if you take a look at the boards, you'll see that the solo scores will be the highest scores you'll ever see, period, compared to the party. So if someone maximizes their solo score, it'll just be the highest, period. And then if you go 2-man, there's a multiplier that kicks out or lessens. And a 2-man will just get a higher score more than like if 2 people do exactly the same thing as a 4-man, the 2-man will just get a higher score by nature because it's just multiplied by that much. Yeah, and I can tell you with Heaven on High for sure, doing it as a 2-man, you will accomplish a ton in Heaven on High. You will be almost fully optimized that probably a 4-man can equal what a 2-man can do if you really, really go hard. So you're almost never going to be a higher score on a 4-man. Yeah, and that's why it sucks because yeah, you can take a 4-man, but you'll just kind of concede the fact that you just won't beat a super optimized 2-man because you're just suffering from that point loss.
How do you even read a 4-man leaderboard? Because some of these have 2 players with the same ranking.
It's just side by side. The scores go together. So if you clear with a 4-man, then you'll just see the same score times 4 for the people.
Well,
so yeah, that's
the top one on Elemental right now is just one person. Do the other 2 like delete their character or something?
It's kind of similar with all the other scores. If you delete the character, if you move servers, it will kill your scores.
Oh really? No.
Yes. So that's same PvP. PvP, if you move servers, your rating is gone. So that's the same with that's the same with Deep Dungeon.
Even
also,
in your past ones?
Yeah, they're gone. Yeah, they're just gone. And also, if you happen to do it in a different world, so if let's say my main is Cactuar, if I'm in a party with someone unlike Gilgamesh, my score won't show up because it has to be on your home. You have to do it on your home world.
Well, I mean, I guess the good thing to look at is it's really easy to prep an alt just to do Palace. You just need to do Copperbell Mines.
Yeah, you do it on Free Chop.
So, I've been doing it on alts.
I am curious then, because that makes me... I'm actually concerned, because I did some PvP on Gilgamesh, and I got some ranking on that, and I moved servers since then. Did I lose all those scores from back then?
Ah.
Oh, that would suck.
Mm-hmm.
I swear my score stayed up there. I don't know. I don't want to think about it right now because that would kind of depress me a little bit.
PvP again.
Oh, well, I still got my mount.
Took your titles away too.
I think with Beasts it saves it, so I think it wouldn't delete because that's just kind of a snapshot. But because Lodestone is and the scores are dynamic, and it always changes every day. I think Y would just get erased if you swap over.
Okay.
So it's essentially like a live rating that you have with Deep Dungeon scores.
Okay.
So finally, looking at Gaia, the top score for party is a duo, but it took several data centers for me to actually find a duo. There's a lot of trios on here. Oh, there's some other duos. I see. That's weird. Okay, so there's not really four mans. It's a bunch of duos and trios.
Yeah, it's just because of that multiplier. It's I don't know what the number is, but there is just a multiplier that kicks in with less and less people. And then if you're optimizing full, I mean, if a 2-man can do what a 4-man can do, then just by default you're just going to get better on a 2-man.
Duoing is really fun though.
It's tough.
I've been duoing more than soloing because it's really good practice for solo, but you also have a buddy to do it with. So it's like, hey, you just ask your one buddy. You know, no one else is online. You ask your one buddy, hey, you want to do a duo? It's really fun. It's really fun. Now you're co-oping. Now you're playing a little co-op game together, and it's not as... You don't need a light party, even. You could be a couple... machinist, ninja, or red mage or something, or one tank and one DPS, and that's really addictive in itself.
Yeah, my experience with a duo is that you almost treat it like a solo, because like things you wouldn't pull solo, you probably still don't want to pull duo. I mean, you could, but it gets dangerous. Or rather, you would know the risk of doing something like that, and it could still kill both of you, even with experienced players. So it gives you the close feel of a solo, which is really nice. That's one of the I personally like duos too. They're a ton of fun because the challenge is still strong, very strong. You can't just like face roll over it with a duo.
Okay.
Oh no, I would say a trio is more close to a 4-man. Where it's chill and you can blow it up. But duo is like mobs are still going to cast their things generally. You need to know what to steal, or you're going to get blown up. You know, if your buddy dies, you could very well die very fast after them if you don't know what you're doing. So yeah, duoing is actually really addictive. I love it.
Okay. But in to keep that perspective, we should probably have them all split up: duo, trio, 4-man, and solo on the leaderboards, because there's no reason not to. I would think that it's such an easy thing for them to fix.
Yeah.
I guess the
only...
Sorry. No. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember SC, someone told me they said this. I didn't see it myself, so I don't know if it's true, but I was told that they said they were surprised by the interest in Deep Dungeon.
Yes.
They will probably look at these scores and see, and they probably would notice, okay, there's a bunch of duos and trios on here. So
I guess the big issue is that they would have to figure out some way to adjust that going forward. Like, they can't go back, because then if they like suddenly split it up, right, then people who are ranked high, or I don't know, just it goofs up the rankings for what it was before. And so I think maybe they might avoid it in that reason, for that rationality. But maybe why not just make seasons, right?
Well, like the thing is though, you also had the data center split when that happened. The score is just essentially just split up into wherever your servers were. So I don't know what it is on the back end that kind of determines your party size or whatever it is, but that has happened before, I guess.
Yeah. You have to also consider this was such niche content for such a long time. I think Angelus said it's been 1,000 days since Deep Dungeon. That it was like, did they want to put all this development time into this and this and this? There's probably the community's learned so much more in the time since this stuff came out, in the years that this come out, that SC would hopefully, if they do another one, next expansion, I'm hoping, they'll put more of that thought into it.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of people that come from like WoW or something, I've seen this in interviews that Yoshi P's been asked about, harder dungeons, scored dungeons and stuff. This is the closest thing you're going to get to it. So I would like to at least see them put more attention toward this. Seasons would be really neat.
Yeah, and me, when I'm diving down the directory sometimes just to see if anyone's just randomly running Deep Dungeon, I've seen a handful of people. I go into their stream and their description is that kind of hardcore, like they're like a speedrunner of like multiple games, and they're just trying this for the challenge. Like, they're actually looking at this because they want the challenge, solo challenge, or in a party, but a lot of them are doing it solo, which is very interesting. Like looking at their background, it's like, oh, they're literally here because they think this is hard and they want to try it.
They're coming from other games?
Yeah, other games, yeah. I think a couple of them were like, kind of what you would expect in like a speedrun community. Like they're speedrunners of the variety of games, something you'd see on like a Games Done Quick or something to that effect. But they look at this and they're like, yeah, I want to try this challenge because it's cool. And with Palace, it's interesting because I mentioned earlier, you can do this on a free trial. You literally don't have to spend money to do this on a free on in the game mode, which is pretty neat. So you can actually get challenged by this and just play it for free, which is great.
Yeah, that is
Someone
mentioned. Go ahead.
Someone mentioned that there's no ultimate, so you've seen a lot of deep dungeon runners lately, and that actually accidentally brings me to thinking how your stock sink down in this content. So in a way, it is kind of like similar that it's always a permanent challenge just sitting there in game. This vast, really high challenge if you want to solo it. So it's always in that way relevant, challenging content. They're not going to add echo to deep dungeon or let you outgear it.
No.
Yeah, the only time it's changing is when the expansion comes in. They do job ability adjustments, all that, like how they adjust the tanks and stuff. That's really the only massive change you'll see in Deep Dungeon. But outside of that, it's pretty much stuck in time because it really won't change unless they directly go into it and adjust something directly.
I mean, that's not out of the normal for them to like say, all right, well, this is a little ridiculous. Let's change it a little bit. Didn't they change Deep Dungeon when there was only one Necromancer clear? Like, didn't they do something to it to nerf it a little bit? Or am I imagining that?
Yeah.
From what I remember, there is a little bit of a damage decrease. You do get hit a lot, not a lot, but noticeably, at least when you compare the numbers, you do get hit less than you did back in Heavensward than you do now. Mm-hmm. That did get weird, though, when they were adjusting Vitality from Stormblood to Shadowbringers. And they have made... and the other big update, I would say, is when in Shadowbringers, you're now able to interrupt Mimics, which you weren't able to prior to. Every job just had to take the pox and that 10-minute debuff. But now jobs that have, which is the tanks and the ranged DPS, can basically go through a run without taking a single pox, which is pretty damn big.
Yeah.
And they directly patched that in, which is to me interesting that they even looked at Deep Dungeon like, hey, we should change this like one little thing. So that was very interesting on that front.
Because I remember Mimics when I was doing it back in the day, and I was just like, this is so stupid. You just click on something, you're like, well, I'm punished automatically. There's no way to get out of it. You're just punished for clicking on a chest. And so it made you not want to open chest at all. But if you have a solution to it, then maybe it's not so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And
that right there was a big misconception too with strategies, is that you don't open chests, but they're the ones that give you the victory, so you have to open chests.
Yeah. What were you saying, Ferro?
I was going to say one of the biggest thing that was added was sustaining pots that people in chat are pointing out that I briefly mentioned earlier. Is this content was stupid to solo when it first hit, and I thought it was impossible. I was like, how would you even begin to do this? Only Heavensward summoners were trying it. I think they were using Titan Eggy to tank for them.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it was so bad. It was really hard. And I was watching people try and do it. I was like, this is impossible. So the sustaining pot, even with sustaining pots, it's still really scary content. But that was, I think, the main thing that they added that made it possible. Because you can actually barely live through stuff now on like a DPS or something.
So what does a sustain pot do, just for people like me?
Well, I'm mousing over it. Grants the effective rehabilitation to yourself for 15 seconds. Recast 15 seconds, so it heals you permanently as long as you hit it every 15 seconds. Okay. And it's a pretty nice regen. And things at high floors, like you're talking about Mimics. The Mimics hit worse and worse the higher you go. I don't know if Angelus would know about the scaling and stuff, but they hit so hard. There's crits in this content, since it is Heavensward Stormblood content. One of those things crits you don't have a steal, you're on a DPS job, you're losing 60% of your HP or something crazy, or even worse if it's a modified floor. And that lets you kind of kite, and there's a whole kiting meta around those Mimics, and just dealing with Mimics solo is really interesting. Whenever anything stops to cast, for example, it's not autoing you. That's good. or having steals on hand. There's a lot of ways to prepare. With a party, you would simply have your tank grab it and then cycle. You'd have a mid, and then everyone cycles silences. It's very important later in Palace is to always have a silence off cooldown before you open a chest, or at least coming off cooldown soon. So you deal with them, and mimics are a big part of Deep Dungeon. I used to think of that as one of the many mobs. That's like a vital point of one of the main challenges is dealing with mimics. What if you get a mimic? You open the mimic, you get another mimic. You open the mimic, you get another mimic after you kill it. You just keep getting these Russian doll mimics and stuff. There's a lot of play around chests. Something that wasn't mentioned yet is something I learned watching Angelus is you know silver chest can be a bomb, so you pull a mob to it and then pop it to blow up the mob and do plays like that. You do plays with bombs on the ground. You grab a bunch of mobs, you pull them onto a floor trap that's been revealed that you know is a bomb trap, and then you nuke them with that. So there's a lot of actually really big brain stuff people do to play around that, and I didn't realize how technical it was. It seems like BS RNG until you see the way people deal with it.
Okay, I didn't know you could move mobs on the traps, to be honest with you.
Well, you pop it on the trap, but you trigger the trap, and it will affect the enemy there.
Okay. So you trigger it. Can you move fast enough to avoid the effect, or do you have to take the effect usually as well?
Depends on the job. Some jobs, in Heaven on High, Black Mage, and Ninja in particular, Ninja you can actually teleport Sakuchi past the landmine and actually trigger it, but not actually hit you. A Black Mage can do the same thing. Can ley lines. If you drop a ley lines really far and you go right in front of a landmine, and then between the lines, you can actually trigger and not take damage.
While you're zooming back, it'll trigger it?
Yep. Because there's like a slight delay, so like you'll get back to your position, but then the landmine goes off, but you're not in that position, so you can get enemies that way. Rescue, if you're in a party, if you rescue someone past the landmine, that will work too. So you can do plays like that on a party member. So yeah.
Jeez.
There's a lot of weird stuff in this, Frosty. If you haven't seen, like,
tell me some more weird stuff. Tell me some more weird stuff besides that.
Well, Angelus could tell you a lot about how crazy it is to have sleep available in your party.
Yeah, sleep is pretty OP. Because you don't. I mean, I don't even know what you use sleep for, like outside of really Deep Dungeon much. But a lot of things in Deep Dungeon can be slept. And one of the interesting things that get involved in here, which is one of the recent clips I had, was that you can de-aggro things in Deep Dungeon. You just have to get really far away, and the distance you need is like 2 rooms. So if like you're looking at the squares, you need 2 rooms away. So if you keep something CC back 2 rooms away, and you run that far away, you will de-aggro something, which is huge, because then if it's on you, it's not there anymore. Otherwise, it'll just chase you down forever. And that's kind of a little bit of old school MMO knowledge, if you will, that if you're just far enough, something just gives up. Or like some MMOs just have like that range that you just get far enough out of their range, they'll give up. But that was a little bit more old school, where they could essentially be anywhere on the map. It's just you just have to be far enough, and they'll eventually give up. So stuff like that comes into play. Sleep, that's where the crowd control is pretty key, because you can definitely. I mean, one of the things that tends to surprise people is when you bind something, because I do it very rarely, but that can buy you a lot of space to heal up and stuff. And you don't not everything binds, but when you can bind something, that's just free time that you have to heal yourself up. And you're typically not using that really anywhere outside per se, so stuff like that comes that's where the full kit comes into play.
Okay So it's just
another thing.
Go ahead.
This is not job specific, but it's related. Every mob has its own rules on what CC works on it. I don't know if there's any 2 CC that always share the same modifier, like if something can't get slept, that means it can never be stunned, for example. But there's mobs that resist stun. There's mobs that resist slow. There's mobs that resist sleep. There's mobs that resist interrupt on their casts. Something that is a giant circle that you could interrupt on one mob doesn't mean this giant circle you can interrupt, which means you just need to be prepared to deal with it in a different way. And everything having its own resistances means there's also a learning curve to it on what you need to know what you can actually use on what to get away from it.
Yeah, and essentially trying to keep track of that as you're doing the run is also part of the challenge too, because you have a variety of enemies that everyone does something different, and that's part of the challenge, just remembering everything all at once. And if something goes wrong, to immediately remember what are your options, and to hopefully decide the correct path on that.
So how well do you need to know the mobs overall going through this?
I mean, knowledge is power. So it's possible for someone to get through if they're like they don't know much. I mean, you can clear that way.
Hmm.
In my end, I personally want to know as much as possible, so you can take advantage of certain, the game mechanic features. You can take advantage of, the exploding traps and everything. But yeah, it's knowledge is power. Having more knowledge will definitely give you just a lot more options to play with when you see something happening. In my opinion.
Hmm. So it's because I'm thinking about this, and like if you go through like a normal dungeon, you don't care what affects any of the mobs at all. You have no care. You're just like whatever, bunch them in a group and AOE as hard as you can. But having every single mob have different ways that you can attack it and address it is actually really Final Fantasy. If you think about it, because when you're playing Final Fantasy in the old RPGs and everything else, you each mob will have some sort of different way that you can tackle it. They take extra fire damage. They take extra ice damage. I don't. That's not the same here, but I mean, like you can sleep them. You could sleep them. You could do other kinds of CC with them. Uh, do you? I don't know if this is in Deep Dungeon, but if you heal like undead, does it hurt them? No, that can't do
No,
that.
that's not in
Definitely
that's not in 14.
There is. He'll
is
probably say it. Sorry.
Go ahead.
The holy damage in Palace.
Oh, that's true. The resolution when you were that's a special case. Because you get a pomander called resolution, which turns you into an angel, and you do have enemies that are basically in game they're categorized as Ashkin, but a lot of people just say undead. And if you use the angel pomander, you can do bonus damage because they are undead and they're taking holy damage.
Okay.
And that can come into play tremendously too. And then to follow up also with all those little details, and you referenced an old MMO, you also have to concern yourself about aggro types. So you have enemies that aggro to sight, aggro to sound, aggro to proximity, and you can handle them differently. I mean, you can, if you know something aggros to sight, you can walk directly behind them without having to concern yourself because you know they're not going to see you. If something is sound, you can just RP walk past them and not aggro them. Period. And having that knowledge is also good because otherwise, if you don't have the knowledge, you're just going to look at every enemy that they're going to aggro you like, oh, they're just going to hit me. But knowing that what they aggro can come into play as well. So
I gotta say that blew my mind. I didn't even know some of that was in the game until I started doing Deep Dungeon. That there are mobs you can RP walk right in front of without touching them, and they will not aggro you. And you need to know which mobs, so you need to know what the CC is, but you also need to know the aggro type because all the time you'll see soloers like Angelus just RP walk certain mobs that they don't have to fight. And I've had runs almost destroyed because we're just walking and then we grab three, enemies that are, worms or something that have we could have just RP walked past a lot of the bugs in Palace and stuff. But there's also mobs that just have don't Palace mimics have ludicrously huge 360 aggro?
yeah, it's ridiculously big.
So when you use an alteration and the next floor creates either I don't know what they call them, Palace. They're these things that die in one hit, and it's just free treasure. Yeah, they have a very high loot drop, or it creates a room of active mimics. And at Palace, they're just stupid.
But they're easy.
You can't get past them. You need to deal with that.
I did see something in chat saying blood aggro. I don't. What's blood aggro?
So blood aggro would be if your HP is lower. Now this is interesting because there was like one enemy in particular in Palace, which were the ghosts that I believed were blood aggro, and I swore that I got aggroed because they're normally sound. So if you walk past them, it should be fine. But there are cases where I'd be walking past them, but my HP isn't full, and I totally aggroed. But some people have been giving a little bit of conflicting kind of results to that, so I'm unsure. But yeah, that was that one very specific enemy that I think did have a blood aggro. But blood aggro shows up in Eureka. That's the thing in Eureka big time.
There's no cast aggro, right? Because I know there's cast aggro in Eureka.
Yeah, not in Deep Dungeon. No cast aggro. That would be horrible.
That'd be cool. Hope maybe on the next one.
that'd be horrible. That'd be cool.
Red Mage.
That is something SE would do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we would know immediately because since we did a lot of red mages, we would know right away if there's cast aggro on red mage. But yeah.
Oh man, yeah, that's kind of interesting to think of all these different mechanics and how things can be approached. And most people who play Final Fantasy 14 don't think about any of this at all. This is all like new concepts to them. Maybe because they haven't played old MMOs or they don't understand it, but it's kind of cool seeing and going through all this, and just nostalgia just overtakes. And that's what Final Fantasy is, to be honest with you. It's just nostalgia.
Sure.
Every game, it's just nostalgia constantly over and over with trying to add some new story or something else to it.
I haven't played a lot of Final Fantasies, but I played a lot of older MMOs. Like I didn't play WoW, but I played EverQuest 2, and I played a bunch of other MMOs that came out at the time. And I do have a lot of nostalgia doing this content because it's the only what I call old school-ish.
Mm-hmm.
It's old school-esque, where you have to use these, like I said earlier, dungeon crawl fundamentals, where you need to kind of know what everything does. Still fun to blind run, but you kind of need to. It doesn't seem mechanically intense, but when you put together all of the procedural generation, new mobs every 3 floors, every 10 floors has its own set of 3 different sets of mobs, the boss, all the pomanders, when you put it all together, it's this really, it becomes intense, even though nothing is like, casting a hello world on you.
Mm-hmm. I will say, now you say EverQuest 2, I remember the big thing, and this tangent, of course, but when EverQuest 2 came out, it was so amazing because you could hit /pizza and then it would go to like a Papa John's website or something for you.
I brought that up on stream a lot.
Yeah.
You could /pizza in game and it would bill your account that you're subbed to, and you would just get a pizza because they already had your address info. That was the best marketing. And they photoshopped like the main antagonist. He points his sword at the viewer, and they just photoshopped him holding a pizza box. I don't know why another MMO hasn't done that. I don't know why WoW hasn't done that or anyone. Just partner with a pizza company and just /pizza.
Yeah? Yeah, it would make sense to me. Well, I mean, you would have to, like, agree all this stuff and, like, agree this is what you want.
I would
they could add a UI to it. They could probably... Why the hell haven't they done that? Like, really big chains? Just add a UI for ordering pizza. It just pops up and you're like, I want a large pizza, pepperoni, all that stuff on there.
That was a small game, too. I mean, it was considered successful before WoW changed what people thought MMOs were successful. It had 200,000 players.
EverQuest 2 was like nothing compared to what EverQuest came out with. I mean, EverQuest was like the MMO, the popular MMO back in the day.
Yeah.
And I have some experience with it, but I wasn't like super into it when it came out. But yeah, no, it's... It was just funny because I remember that. I remember all the memes that kind of came from that. Actually, I don't even know if memes were a thing back then. All the jokes on the internet back then. Oh, I'm old. Oh, imagine being born before memes.
Yeah.
Anyways.
A lot of people probably don't know exactly what I mean when I say old school MMO, because and all the time I play this game, I've met a lot of people that are this is their first MMO.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they played some Final Fantasy games. A lot of console players is their first MMO.
Yeah.
So it's good to go in depth on this deep dungeon stuff because they don't know about like all the CC, heavy CC. Everything was tank and spank, really, basically. But it went really hard. It was more like, I don't know. It was more like if Diablo was an MMO, but you had hot bars where mobs don't do a lot of things, but you need to know what it does.
Mm-hmm.
And gear is more important, etc.
Yeah. I think, the interesting... Talking about this and pulling all this together, because when we're talking about Deep Dungeon, we are talking about some old school mechanics. And Eureka and like other things, they're trying to implement some kind of old school MMO life into Final Fantasy XIV, because it doesn't work as a business model for an MMO to have the game be old school. They need to adapt to random party matching, things that are easy for people to jump in and out. They just need people to be subbed every month. It doesn't matter if they spend hours and hours like they used to with MMOs. Because the forefront of MMOs before was graphics, being in a 3D graphic atmosphere. That was a huge jump, and I think that's what got EverQuest so popular. And other things that kind of evolved there. But sorry, going back to this and bringing back these old aspects, I think new players do appreciate it because new players like little challenges, little grindy things that they do. For example, Dark Souls is a new game of sort of, I guess. it's a newer game that people are experiencing, and they like it for the difficulty. And I think adding these old school mechanics kind of adds that extra bit of difficulty people don't want to see in their day to day MMO life. But when they were ready for the challenge, they would go and do it.
Yeah, old school MMOs, like all these mobs we're talking about, that was just like the overworld of an MMO. This game's overworld is very gentle to you. You go into Palace and it's gentle, but once you start getting to the higher floors, you need to know what things do. And that was like just going into a random cave. Old MMOs had open dungeons. Imagine if you could just walk somewhere in Fanaland and suddenly you're just going down 100 floors or 200 floors. It's like that. It gives that feeling of the crawl. The crawl that's not in the game anywhere else, really, unless you count some of the Eureka stuff and the Baja stuff, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so when we're talking about like future terms for Deep Dungeon and everything else, I kind of have a theory. I don't know if maybe, and I haven't, maybe this has been said before or something else, but the next Deep Dungeon is just going to be going back to the first and doing Crystal Tower. Is what I think it's going to be, but I don't know.
You think so?
Yeah, because they don't want to get rid of the first completely, I'm assuming, and they want to give us a reason to go back. And Crystal Tower is a tower, right? Like the main Crystarium or whatever. And there's still stuff going on in there. We went in there and did a dungeon in it.
Yep.
At some point. So
Kind of right.
I'm going to sound really anti-fun here, but I always say whenever someone asks me if I can just think about what SE might do, I always say, SE do what SE want. If they want to write their own story and put something there, they'll do it. Maybe we'll be going to the space. Maybe we'll be going to the bottom of the... Maybe we're in another dimension. It doesn't have to be a tower. I mean, Palace is a hole. Maybe they're going to go sideways. I don't know.
Yeah, everyone jokes about that. You went up, you went down. We got to go sideways now.
What would that even be?
Up.
Like a spaceship? And you
Maybe.
go forward?
Maybe an Ashian will take Heaven on High and put it into Palace of the Dead, into the hole, and then you've got a double dungeon or something. I don't know.
Okay. I mean, we do expect Endwalkers has to have a Deep Dungeon add-on at some point. Hopefully, it also has PvP, which they said, right? They're going to do something with PvP. Maybe there's something new with it.
Well, with Deep Dungeon, what they said in one of the recent articles is like they're planning it and they're conceptualizing it. But I think what they say, it was like based on how everything else was going development wise, which is weird because then it kind of makes me feel like, oh, if things start getting delayed, then I guess that's getting delayed. But I guess if everything stays on schedule, we should more or less see a Deep Dungeon. That was also the same one that they mentioned, like they were actually surprised by the interest in Deep Dungeon. That was like the same article. So yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic about it, but again, like if I start hearing like, we push back more Ultimate even further, it's like, oh well, so does Deep Dungeon, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
So it's like, but
yeah,
we'll see.
Like I said earlier, SC do what SC want. I don't know what they're gonna do. Every expansion is different. This expansion, so every expansion since Heaven's Sword, the alternative leveling where you don't need to queue for any current expansion stuff was Palace and Heaven's Sword, HOH in Stormblood, and this expansion is actually Baja. You can go in there at 71 and level up in there. So that's the current alternative level.
Well, I guess alternative level Eureka.
Oh yeah, Eureka as well. I'm sorry. Wait, did it give you?
You couldn't level up in Eureka, could you? It was like its own little world. I can't.
Yeah, it was literally its own little world. I think.
Yeah.
Did you get XP outside of it? I don't. Someone will say if you do or not, because you can do it right now. I haven't really done Eureka. I did it to get my tomes up. I call it alternative tome as well, because you get everything that you want. Okay, you didn't. So Baja is unique in that, and I think they did that because there wasn't a deep dungeon. And they always do it really late in the expansion. Like Heaven on 8, I can't remember Palace, but it was way at the end of Heaven's Sword.
It was the 0.35 patch that they both got released. So
okay, yeah.
3.35, 4.35. And actually, that's where Baja landed. 5.35 is where Baja got released.
I remember progging Ultima when it came out, the Ultimate. And then when that was done, like a month or two went by or something, and then HOH hit, and that was a blast. Because it for me, that kind of fills the wait for the next Savage. If you do Ultimate really fast, it fills the wait, and I always go back to that every drought. So it's very good content when you can't think of anything else to do. But it's also fun to do all the time. I don't want to make it seem like it's only filler content. So yeah, if they do it next expansion, it would probably be 0.35.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that would make sense. I mean, it's not going to be like on the release, I don't think, because the release, when they come out, they have to do like the main content, right? They have to do the story. You got to get through the main story. Everything else you got to get through Savage, and then after that, you know, they start throwing in like extra stuff. 6.1 and going forward, you'll start seeing that side content, which isn't side content for people like Angelus, but it's you know, it is in the broad scale of what SE's looking at. That's what they would call it.
Well, as mentioned, its main concept was kind of that level catch-up system midway through. Like, you know, if you're falling behind on jobs, hey, use this one thing to bring it all back, maybe prep for the next expansion. But I mean, if they decide to break that route, then it would be curious as to the reason why they would do it. Because then, in my mind, it's like the only reason they would break it out of that leveling route is to maybe make it harder, maybe make it more challenging, or maybe have some type of even further competitive. Because there would be almost no other reason to do it, since its main functionality, its main functionality for a vast majority of people is to use that as that level catch up. It just, you know, it was just very nice of it to have a rather awesome kind of challenge to it that you can give it to and put so many hours into it, which, you know, you don't even know that was even what they thought was what people would end up doing. So I guess it would still be not out of the realm that they would show it up early, but if they decide to break that loop, then yeah, it might even change conceptually in how it would be done with just in the game in general.
Yeah. Okay.
There is something I would like to add to that. This is just a little gamer theory, but I don't know if you've seen what it's like to solo some of the bosses in Palace and HOH, but there's a couple that are really intense and have a lot of tech to them, especially Behemoth, which I don't know if you've seen someone solo Behemoth. I saw Angelus solo that on different jobs. That is the scariest shit I've ever seen in my life, because it is really scary, and you have to have a rotation ready for it, and you have to time everything. And usually when you engage one of those bosses solo, you check your timer, and he's measuring how much DPS he's doing each minute to see if he can kill it in time, if he has to pop a Pomander. There's always that time thing, but there's also that the boss is actually just going to obliterate you if you don't do it correctly, because one of them has a DPS check at the end of it that just utterly obliterates you on certain jobs if you don't burn it. You have to burn it dead in like how many seconds?
Depends on the job, but you have to pretty much kill it within, once it starts ecliptic, you have like 30 seconds, 20 seconds for certain DPS jobs. Tanks can probably go like 40 max if you're weaving in your invulns and everything, but it's less than a minute. You have to kill it.
The fact that they put that in 180 is really scary, that the boss just stands up and starts spamming Ecliptic Meteor, and that's HP based, right?
Yep, 80% max.
80% of your HP. And he just he just spams it and does it really fast. And it is the scariest thing. And a lot of people lose their runs there from what I've seen in Discords and stuff. But what I wanted to say is, going into SE has evolved a lot with 1v1 or bosses that are in non-raid content. They've done all the Baja 1v1s. Mm-hmm. I kind of been hoping they'll go kind of ham on at least one of them in the next deep dungeon. Obviously, they wouldn't go too crazy, but I wouldn't put it past SE to say, "Oh, here you go on, you know, the last boss to you have an actual Baja 1v1 level of craziness. Maybe use a Pomander for it or something." Because they actually already have a boss where you have to kind of Pomander helps you pound it. I think it's the 150 boss, the succubus or something, or there's a ghost that you can just wreck.
140 is the one you can cheese.
Yeah, so with how much they've evolved in the 3 years since this has come out, I wouldn't be surprised if they really added something really cool to see, because the bosses are already, the HOH 90 boss is already really scary to do. There's already different strats for that and how different jobs handle it.
Well, and also, like, even if, like, I actually would be, I've been saying this a couple times on stream, like, I would love for them to put, like, literally, like, Lion as, like, the floor 10 boss, like, start there and go up, because I feel like the bosses in Deep Dungeon are more or less kind of easy up until the ones you mentioned: 180 for Palace, 190 for Palace, 90 for Heaven on High. But it would be fascinating to also see, like, even if, say, you put just straight up, you just transplant Lion into the boss in Deep Dungeon and make that as the encounter. I mean, I imagine a 4-man should probably handle that relatively, not easy, but not that bad. So it would translate nicely there. It would still be a pretty decent challenge for the 4-man, but it would then be this ridiculous challenge for a solo that translates to solo.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Like, if you just start, because they are making these solo fights. We even saw it in Savage DR, right? They had a solo encounter in there. And so it would be interesting to start seeing their boss design, especially in like Deep Dungeon, things where it's an option to go solo, be focused on, hey, what's the experience if you're doing this solo? Make it very difficult, very hard, like a challenge, but possible. And then just let more people do it if they want to have a group go in. And it'll be just an easier experience because you have more people. Hopefully, usually that means it's an easier experience. But it would also be designed and optimized for a solo player going in there, and the hardest, difficult solo content that can be done.
Yeah, like what is interesting to me was that evolution of what they thought about solo in general. Because my perspective is from the solo thing. I almost kind of take away the party out of my mind in essence, but I'm sure there is also definitely a big perspective there. But Palace of the Dead, when it was first released, a lot of us definitely felt like that they didn't mean for that to solo. They're just like, oh, by the way, you can go in solo. But a lot of what was there did not feel very solo friendly between the enemy aggros, Behemoth being one of the ones that just for a long time just seemed like, oh, well, you just go in Red Mage and that's it. But that definitely evolved with the community just trying these wacky ass strats and building all these rotations that eventually something seemed to happen. And it now currently is very weird that a lot of the jobs that can get past that boss in particular is extremely tight. And it almost looks like from just looking at it as the viewer, like you had to actually do it this particular way or one of the two particular ways. And it felt like it was meant for that, but it really wasn't in the beginning. And then when Heaven on High got released, what I felt like with Heaven on High is that they made a huge quality of life just in general. Like one of the ones I remembered was silver chests was the huge one, because in Palace of the Dead, a lot of people always ask, why do you open silver chests in Palace of the Dead? It's like, well, I do it for points. I like the high score, but really there is no reason for you to open silver chests if your arm is full. And then Heaven on High came out, and they put magicites in blue chests. I'm like, oh, well, now they're all of a sudden the most important chests you need to do. You will never skip them because you need this super powerful commander. And then on top of that, they like reorganize all the aggros, and also the fact that all the rooms are all very like structured and big squares, as opposed to Palace where it's all, all the cave and the weird small rooms and the irregular rooms. You felt like there was this huge quality of life that still maintained the challenge of a party. But when you started to do the solo experience, you're like, oh, this is really nice. Not a lot of enemies will aggro me because I can get around them from just the side aggro. Even the Pomanders, I mean, in Palace of the Dead, using Rage was kind of a pain in the ass because you could still die with Rage if like you had certain circumstances, but then you had a Magicite, you had a Petrify, which, as long as you do it more or less correctly, you're getting off the floor. So there has been kind of, I feel, that evolution, and maybe it would carry over with how they handled some of the solo stuff in Badsha, and adding that into maybe the next Deep Dungeon or whatever solo thing they decide to do. That would be actually pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good point brought up earlier about maybe they would add Lion, because all of the Deep Dungeon is reused mobs, which doesn't make it uninteresting, by the way. In the same way that Ultimate is a lot of reused mechanics. They're very much different, but I could see them taking some more interesting mobs that have evolved over time and putting them as bosses in there, or even just mobs. I'm gonna laugh if they do a Deep Dungeon and Lion is one of the bosses. I want to see Mind Jacks. I want to see Twisters. I want to see them go crazy in one of them. I could see them doing that. Because also, like Angelus said, this content was, I saw it as impossible when it first came out. But they have the scores on their site, so they have it in full vision. Maybe the old Yoster is checking it every day to see if anyone's beat his score. I don't know. Maybe he's on an alt competing himself.
He probably
can see. they can see the scores. So they'll take that into account. I think if I just had to gamer theory it, that they would say, "Oh, look how many people have soloed this. We can do this." Like Ultimate, where they say if at least one team clears it in X amount of time, then we won't nerf it like they did for T. I could see them definitely ramping up a little bit without making it impossible like it originally was.
Well, I mean, he watches the show every week, so he's getting all the advice you guys are giving right now too. So.
Oh, he does?
Yeah.
Can we get a couple dots back added to Scholar? Yoshi, pretty please. I want my dots back. I want to be hybrid again.
I'm sure he's writing it down right now.
He's gonna take Broil away.
Yeah. He's gonna take DPS away from healers completely.
Please no.
It's all gonna be book smacked. You just run up and you're just like, how often can I be next to the boss?
All right, I'm a Sage main now.
Oh, jeez. Same thing with Sage, no. After that trailer with the Sage coming out and just shooting lasers and going crazy offensively, they can't take damage really away from healers.
Those are healing blades. It's like the medic's gun in TF2. It shoots, but it actually heals.
Yeah, it just shoots healing beams. Yeah,
it just shoots healing.
Soldering cuts and stuff or whatever.
I remember Heaven's Sword. If you had clerics, they changed stances entirely in Shadowbringer. If you stanced and got to a floor that was abilities disabled in a deep dungeon, you were stuck with that stance for the whole floor. So I remember doing it with 4 people. If you had cleric stance on and you were in a light party, you were not healing the next floor. It'd be gloom, abilities disabled, no items or something, and you're like, oh, I can't heal, guys. Sorry. So you had to do there was all of that extra tech that was not very quality of life friendly.
All right, I'm going to ask some questions from chat while going back and forth kind of between other questions that are not from chat. But here's just like a very loose question here from apparently Angelus' favorite mod. Do you have a favorite moment or experience soloing Deep Dungeon? Anything unique or particularly rewarding or epic that sticks in your head?
That would be my ninja clear in Heaven on High, hands down. Because I literally hit the shrine when the clock hit 0, and it still gave me the victory. It hit 0 and I hit it. Yeah.
Wow.
I was on 499, and I had a petrify ready, so it was a floor wipe. But I walked into there with I think 2 minutes or a minute and a half. So I had a minute and a half to get through that floor to the shrine. And it was really funny because I had a sight, so I got to see what the floor was, and it was just 5 rooms, but the exit was all the way at the very end. I'm like, great, that's exactly what needs to happen right now. So we go through, I get to the thing. I think I walk into the last floor with 15 seconds, and I was ready to just hear the duty fail in my ear. So I was like, whatever. I kept spamming enter, but I wasn't looking at my screen. I was just ready to hear it in my ear. But thank God for server ticks. Thank God for ninja movement speed, because I just got there exactly in time. But the VOD does show that the clock literally hit 0 before it actually confirmed that I got the victory. So yeah, that was pretty ridiculous.
You're very calm when you do those solos. I would have spazzed out and thrown my mouse accidentally.
Oh, dude, that last floor. So one of the neat functionalities of ninja, if you're a ninja player and you know what you can do there, is that if you do ninjutsu like Raitan or something, you reset your Sakuchi. So in my brain, I was already, okay, I'll just line up all the Sakuchi, I'll just line up all my Raitan so I can Sakuchi past the entire floor, but I completely botched every single one of them. I only got 1 Sakuchi up. I didn't even use
no.
So I was choking at the end because I was just panicking trying to get through there. So I would have been there a lot faster, but it might look like I'm calm, but no, I was panicking hard because, you had to hit the right buttons correctly, but I couldn't do it. So yeah, that was nerve-wracking to do when you knew time was just melting away.
Yeah. Oh, and it is a good point. Yeah, and Angelus wouldn't throw his mouse because he doesn't play with a mouse.
I already threw years ago.
He would throw his keyboard. I don't know. He's not throwing anything.
Oh, well, it's funny because when I was watching that, when I pulled that clip from your stream, right before we started this stream, I did notice there's absolutely a difference between how you and Angelus react to things. Because when you died, you're like, "What the fuck? Do it! Go! Fucking do it! Witching!" I think that's what you're saying. I can't remember.
Yeah. Oh, there's witching yelling in my ear. I'm like, oh my god.
Just screaming at everyone.
It's because I think they both had their things closed and were just letting me use them. And I didn't know he would pull that mob because that mob is really scary on well, I mean it's a trio, but still I didn't think he would pull that mob. That mob instantly does like a huge AoE Dragoon dive basically.
Hmm.
And so I was like witching, screaming it, and they didn't have their things open, so they're trying to open it, and then a mob walked around the corner and aggroed them too. It's on a gloom floor. And then I changed it to I saw them both get autoed, so they were one auto from dying, and then someone magicited.
Nice.
You have panic moments if things go wrong, and that's actually a big part of 4-man plays. You need to sometimes communicate who's pulling and who's opening chests and designate people who's going to pop the pomanders, and you kind of need to organize things a bit more when you're in a group, because if you have a DPS who's just going to be like, I'll pull the first thing I see, and then the tank pulls something else, boom, your run can end really fast, which is what happened there. Tank pulled one mob, I pulled another mob, and I was like, oh, I thought you, and he's like, I thought you, and then we almost wiped out.
Did you ever fight a griffin after it uses Winds of Winter, and it's still, like, you're still alive and it's still alive?
Not solo. The first time I saw Winds of Winter, I screamed, I don't know what that is, we're all gonna die, or something. And
solo, I did it one time back. I didn't know I was doing it, but I got hit with it by accident. And I think I had a dot on, so I died, I got back up. And it re-aggroed because the dot. So, like, if you leave a dot on, if the enemy goes flat, it re-aggros. But the thing I didn't realize is that when it uses Winds of Winter, it also gets haste. So when it did free fall, it was near instant and I didn't get out. I'm like, okay, great.
Oh no!
Nice.
Yeah, you know you're running and don't get out of it.
HOH before you learn that.
Yeah, that was like the first. I think that was like a couple months ago that I figured that out, because I never got hit with that move. I never died to it, so I never knew it gave itself haste, and I didn't know it would speed up its AOE's to some ridiculous. Yeah, that was a nice thing to find out.
Okay,
that's crazy.
I have another question that came up that actually involves spinning bosses. And so it's basically just asking your opinion on spinning bosses. It feels like there's a stigma surrounding it, whether it's kosher, that's required to clear on some classes. What's your thoughts on spinning a boss around?
Well, on my end, I said it before. Like every runner, it's your own run. So like what I do, what you do, it really does have no effect on me. I guess visually, like if you're watching someone, that becomes a thing that people get to talk about, because you're watching the person do the spinning and everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's been an interesting topic overall, because some people think it's exploiting, some people think it's unintentional, some people reference. I don't know if Ferro can give a backstory in that one, but I remember people always referencing turn 9 on Coil, because initially people were doing it there, and then they kind of like fixed it basically. And then you have functionality now in Shadowbringers where you just literally can't spin anything because they just don't allow it mechanically. So it's in my end, I did it before. I don't do it anymore. The reason I don't do it is because I've had conversations with lots of people that they look at it and they're like, I just can't do it, whether they're a controller player or whatever it is. And then so for me, I always feel like I want to introduce the content to people, to the biggest audience, if you will. So if you feel like you can't do it, I almost feel a slight responsibility to do it in your kind of play style, if you will, to then kind of display like, okay, this is how you can do it on the way you play. And so that's why I've kind of moved away from it for myself, because lots of people have just been like, I can't really do it like this. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And how I approach it is like, look, we have a number of runners that do it really good. So if you want to see it, then check them out. But if you want to see it this way, check me out. That kind of feel. So. But yeah,
I don't have a particularly strong opinion on what people do in their own runs, but I'm pretty sure that's something SE would fix if they knew about it, because they've been known to fix really old stuff even when it's reported later. They don't fix too much savage. They consider them proper strats, but I think spinning a boss is not what they would consider an intended or even strat, like tank L being something to skip it. That's more like you're kind of skipping the whole fight. So I think if SE knew about it, they would probably patch it. But I think it takes, so if you're doing 4-man stuff, that takes away from part of your adventure, I mean, you could just spin everything and just treat it. I mean, I guess if you're farming gil or something, you could do that. Does that even work on normal mobs or just bosses?
No, it's everything in Deep Dungeon. You can literally spin everything.
I'm filing my report right now. I'm sorry, guys.
Which is interesting because for the longest time, I think some of the discussion was, well, like you said, like, well, if they wanted to fix it, I guess they could. But then it was like, well, could they fix it, right? I guess the thing is like, well, it's already here. Why would they go back and fix something that's just, whatever? I mean, I guess you can go and maybe like, slap some warnings on people, I guess, but it was whatever. But it was interesting with Boccia, because Boccia, when that came out, you just can't spin anything. I tried, I went and tried, and it just doesn't work. So to me, that almost spelled like, oh well, I guess if they wanted to, they could. You know what I mean? And it would be interesting to see, I guess, in the next Deep Dungeon, what their decision would be for that format. Like, do they allow it? Do they not? Because it seems, I don't know if it's just like a literal switch, but it would be, I guess, their conscious decision to let it through or let it not, and whether they think it's intended or not. So.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I mean, it does kind of take away from the experience of getting on a leaderboard and everything and spinning around mobs and getting your clears and everything. It does add a little bit of doubt to some people's runs if they're not streaming it or showing what they're doing. They're like, oh well, they just ran through and spun everything.
I mean, that gets into the same idea as there was an exploit in A10 and Alexander 10 Savage where you could spin him forever and he would just not phase and you could just kill him. And that got uploaded to FF logs, and that caused a big discussion, I remember. And they flagged the logs as exploit, and
well, that's all community
effort.
stuff.
It's community stuff, yes. Yeah. But the thing is, that's why I think if word got to SE, they back it with their own scores. I think they would consider that in the realm of spoiling the spirit of the competition. I don't really particularly care if someone just wants to do it for fun. I don't care what someone does. I never cared if someone spun a boss. It's once you bring it into my score is better than you, and this and that, and then people start having to say, oh, you have to show a VOD, or your score is gone because I don't know if you spun it or not, or all that stuff. Then you get into that. So I think in the end, it is something that shouldn't be possible. Just because there is a score behind it.
No, I see that too, and I think it's something that would be nice for them to address. I know at the moment, unless if it was an easy fix, they wouldn't do it. If it was an easy fix, they'd probably go forward with fixing that. But just because they have so many other things they have to focus on development-wise going into a new expansion, which is why we didn't get Ultimate. But
I wanted some guy to code Dizzy, and if a mob gets Dizzy, they just get mad and just drop a Dala mood on you or something.
Oh,
yeah, if you spin a mob and it can't auto for a certain amount of time, it just Dala moods you and wipes your entire
party.
Or do
like a frenzy or something and just like start going crazy and hitting everything.
Every mob has some guy who coded the original Deep Dungeons, whoever was the main developer on that, he just gets to create his own enrages. Yoshi P comes down and knocks a day off your sub or something.
That would be great. I would love to see something like that. All right, so you talked a little bit about the length of Deep Dungeon, but I mean, what do you think that in the end we went from 200 to 100 floors going into Heaven on High? Is 100 the right amount, or should it be shorter than that, or what should the future Deep Dungeon look like in terms of length?
Well, for 4 players, soloers might think different, but when H2H came out, for 4 players, I thought it was a big quality of life increase, because for 4 players, Palace is basically slam out the 100 floors, and then you get to the juicy ones. And HOH is roughly comparable to 100 to 200. And 1 to 50 is pretty. There's nothing really to do there. As a 4-man, you just kind of split up and do every floor in 1 minute. Sometimes past 100, you're doing every floor in 1 minute as fast as you can, just to get to the good one. So for 4 players, HOH was a lot more fun, which is why I've done it so much more. And the difficulty spike is really crazy. So I feel like HOH was an improvement, at least for light parties or trios or duos doing it, because it's still long. I mean, if you're really good at it, you could probably do it in 3 hours or less. If you have a bunch of machinists and you're just going, you could probably do it in less than that if you're not going for the mounts in there, which is what most people I know go for. And solo, I think Angelus would be able to tell you about, the length of it solo for 100 versus 200.
It's longer. Well, the thing is, I guess, I mean, it depends on what audience you're kind of aiming for in the bigger scale of things, right? Like, you wouldn't necessarily be aiming it for, say, the solo community, because that's a very small percentage of people right now. So, I mean, Palace, I think, I'd want to say, although I can't really say it from experience, but that one's rough because for just a casual group of 4, you're probably looking at a temporary static. You're probably going to have to do it in 2 days. I don't think you can push. I don't think you can push. Even if you start at 51, I don't know if you can push that out in 1 day. We're talking a casual static, not like guys who have their time in and have done it before, etc.
Right.
You're probably going to look at a 2-day adventure, which I've heard lots of stories of people like, hey, I've tried it before, but I never got to the top because we didn't get back together. And that's statics for some people are difficult to maintain, get the time and all that stuff, of course, especially for something that's going to be like that. Heaven on High feels like a nice thing, because even if you go into the static, I mean, you're talking of if you're just going for a clear, there's almost no point of you going from floor 1. So you're starting at 21, so you're probably looking at a maximum of 7 hours if you, for some reason, spend 60 minutes on every 10 floors. So you're probably looking at an average of, I don't know, upper limit of 5 hours if you're going like really careful. And yeah, probably about 3, 4 around there if you're going at a somewhat decent speed. For solo, I mean, for solo, you still have to move relatively fast to knock it off a Heaven on High in one go. I mean, it takes me, I think, 7 hours to maybe 8 hours to do, depending on the job, 1 to 100 in one go. Palace of the Dead is just easily, it has to be split in 2 days, unless I go for like a marathon or something. So that's, it is what it is. I mean, I'm personally, if you give me a deep dungeon that's 300, I'm not going to say, well, I'm not doing it. Like, I'm going to do it, but that's going to be pretty rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna take 1 week just to get a run ready. So on the solo end, but yeah, so
I don't think it would be bad if they increased floors, as long as they didn't have what people would consider filler floors.
yeah,
Like if like HOH 150 would be lunacy, but you've got HOH to prepare for. You have to do Palace to get to HOH. You can't do you have to do floor 50 of Palace before you can even step into HOH. And knowing SE, they'll probably make you have to do 30 of HOH before you can get into whatever the next one is, Yoshi P's office or something. And I think the getting back together thing is a big reason why I push people to do HOH as a group first if they want to try with FC mates or whatever, because you can realistically do it one sitting, even if you're really slow. Like, the longest run I ever did was 6 minutes with multiple breaks, like multiple 15-minute break, or 6 hours with multiple 15-minute breaks, because so and then it's like, okay, I know these guys, they kind of get an idea of this. Now we can take on Palace. So I consider Palace like the one you do after you've cleared, and I still try and push people to do it one sitting, but it's pretty rough to do it in one sitting. I mean, even doing it with Ultimate Gamers the other day with Gerald, Jeffo, and Zeph, they were like dying by the end of it because it was like 7 or 8 hours or something to push through it. And that is the biggest killer of all my Palace runs is, oh, sorry guys, I can't go tomorrow. Can we go the next day? Oh, then we wrap around all the way to the end of the week, and it's like, oh, sorry, it was actually a fluke that I could even join up with you guys today. And I'm like, okay, run's gone. So yeah, for quality of life, you should probably do HOH first. Get to know who you're running with. I'm making little link shells and stuff with people I run with, and then you can go on from there. And I guess if you don't have anybody to run with, there's people in Angelus's Discord and the Deep Dungeon Discord. They have LFG channels for getting into it. So I mean, if you're really new, you could probably get a guided person to help you as well.
Yeah.
I think that's in my mind the perfect length would be like a raid night, and a raid night's like 3 hours. Right, and you could go through a complete run in 3 hours, and that would be a little bit closer to what I would see as ideal, because that is an issue where you have to do things in multiple days, unless if you have because you have to go with the same people, right? You can't You can't like
Yep.
add in subs for a night. You can't be like, hey, my friend couldn't make it. Could you fill in? No. You can't go without him either, right? I mean, you just have to just kill the run if they never show up again.
Which then puts an interesting kind of flip to that when you're running solo, because like, yeah, a run would take, like a Palace of the Dead would take you, I don't know, 14 hours, but you can split that up in an entire month because you're just by yourself. You can go 10 floors a day, and that's very convenient. That's at most an hour. And that's extremely convenient for if you're limited on time or you have other things to do. Like, you can just start chipping it away little by little, but that's the benefit of going by yourself. In the group, you have to have the same people running into it. So it's kind of a flip thing there in essence, which is kind of interesting too. But like I said, they're not going to be like, oh yeah, we'll do it for these guys. Like, they got to think of the bigger crowd, in my opinion.
Well, I think splitting up is fine because it's meant to be. It is meant to be like you do form like a little temporary static. And me personally, I like to get people into it and then figure out, okay, who wants to do this more regularly? Who wants to do this again? Who wants to try and get the mounts? Who wants to try different things or go faster? And then I build from there. And you will have runs that you can't continue. I think one thing they could fix is just adding more saves per character would be nice instead of having two. Because I once had a character where I used the save and then the people couldn't get together. So I was like, okay, I'll go with these guys. And then they were like, oh, I can't finish it. And I was like, okay, I guess I got to change characters then if I want to do this content. So I have my own rules I've assembled where it's like you have to, if I only invite someone to do HOH if they can do it in one sitting. So I think even some casual people have a day where they can play like, 5 or 6 hours or something. And Palace, yeah, you're going to want to do that. But that also makes the content, it has pros and cons. You would think if they just opened it up so anyone could continue, I think that would kind of spoil some of it. If you could just bring in, get to the hard floors and then just bring in someone that does it all the time and pay them some gil and then they'll just kind of get you through it or something. So I think that is part of the journey, is sticking with the same people. I think that's very much part of the content. I don't think they should do a shorter. I think HOH is as short as it should go, in my opinion, because this is very much supposed to be the long haul dungeon of the game. I don't know what it was, and you said you played WoW. There was like a long haul 6-hour dungeon in that game that people still talk about years later. I think that's very much what they're going for, but they realized Palace was just a bit too long, so I don't think they'd shorten it. Maybe 10 floors or something, but I think they've hit, for me, a sweet spot with length.
You mentioned bringing people in to help you clear. I didn't think about this. Angelus, does anyone offer you like gil to come and just like run through deep dungeon for them, and they just kind of hang back while you go and clear everything?
No, not directly. I mean, I've offered to help people to go in, and that's a lot of fun. So I've done that.
They don't do anything. They just let you carry them through the whole thing.
It's a mutual effort, but yeah.
Okay.
You go in, I spout out, hey, don't touch this thing. You may not want to do this one. Just letting you know, and then just kind of just making it through as best as possible. But that's a lot of fun on my end. I like doing that. I wouldn't. You don't need to give me something for that. Like, yeah, it's
have like a service going on. All right.
I teased Angelus about this on a stream that I'm like, hey, has anyone offered you $1,000 to log into their character and get them a necromancer title? He's like, hey, I'm sure there's someone out there that's maybe someone's done it, but I think you might actually start seeing that if they add a better reward than just a title, because a lot of people, title's a title, but when they see a weapon, a glowy weapon, the only weapons that you get for Palace and HOH right now is when you trade in your 99.99 ether pool to get the weapon. And that's that really shiny looking one. And I think if they added a weapon to solo, you would start seeing that stuff.
Well, I mean, solo, you would have to log into their account and everything, I guess.
Yeah.
So you're scared. Imagine Angelus getting like caught in a scandal like years from now for doing RMT and like, pushing people through. I'll give up everything just so I could do my stupid RMT. Oh jeez, that would be horrible. Oh man, now I maximized my OBS. Hold on, what am I doing? Here we go. Anyways, sorry, something on my end technical. There was another question here. This was to Ferro. Do you plan on doing more solo temps on multiple classes, or just complete it on the one job and be done?
The 3 jobs that Angelus said, in his opinion, are the strongest, and correct me if I'm wrong, for soloing, is Ninja, Red Mage, Machinist, correct?
That's what I personally say. Yeah, I like those jobs the best.
I like those 3 because they're really bursty. So in the low floors, you don't take a while to kill it. You run and blow things up. So for me, how the first floors go and how tolerable that is a big part of how I enjoy soloing. Like I tried tanking there and I was like, I can't do this. This thing's taking too long to die. So maybe someday I'll do tank. But Ninja looks really fun, which is funny because I really didn't like the Shadow Fang change to Ninja, and I was iffy on the changes to Ninja. I understood it was better, but rating, I liked right before they changed Ninja. I was like, wait a minute, this is content that I actually like the Ninja changes in, so I might be doing Ninja and Red Mage and Machinist, and then if I'm still, I might, if I get more experience, then maybe I'll try some other stuff. Because time is, to me, the scariest thing in there. In addition to all these things you're dealing with, is the timer is just ticking down, and you don't want to time out. So the lower DPS jobs pressure you in that way that you need to keep moving, and you have a certain amount of time spent. If you're soloing a boss, it's going to take 12 minutes or something, depending on the boss. If you don't have certain commanders,
I mean, if you want an idea, I mean, I know you said that tanks are boring, but I mean, for Heaven on High, I still personally say the top 3 for me are the same as Palace with his Red Mage, Machinist, Ninja. But Gunbreaker does have the most clears in Heaven on High, and one of the things that a lot of the runners have gotten accustomed to if they're going for high scores is with Gunbreaker. You said the floors were boring, but it's, I think, almost slightly mandatory if you're going for high score in Gunbreaker that you are essentially full pulling the entire floor from like 1 to 50, and that gets really interesting.
Okay, to try to I didn't know that.
Yeah, if like you don't have to, right? I mean, it is get going if you go one at a time, but if you wanted to go for that high score on like a tank, you basically are pulling the entire floor, every single floor, and that gets interesting. So that could make it a little fun, and you can do it. Gunbreaker, in my opinion, has one of the better kits for it too, for survival and just overall just damage. It's very good. So. Yeah,
that's actually the fastest way to 4-man easy floors in Palace and HOH is. I know I said you split everyone up, but you split everyone up. They scout every room, they tag every mob, and then they drag it to the tank, and then you just AOE everything down. That's how you really speed run. That's good if you're grinding the shortcuts too, but you kind of speed run by just grabbing everything and pulling it into one spot, blowing it up, and sitting on the key. Mm-hmm. So the fact that that's done in solo doesn't surprise me. I'm disappointed I didn't think of it or didn't know about it, but that does sound fun.
Yeah,
I was killing one mob at a time. I was being stupid.
Yeah,
like boring because I my machinist brain. You just blow something up, then you go to the next thing. You blow it up, you go to the next thing.
Okay. I'm gonna ask some more questions about like the future of Deep Dungeon and things that you might want to see quality of life wise going forward. We did talk about a few things during the show overall, but is there anything else you can think of that would be a great addition and make it more enjoyable for players going through this content, whether it's solo or with a group? I'll let Angelus start this one.
See, it's interesting because I mean I've run a number of ideas out for funsies, just thinking process wise of like, oh, this would be nice to add in, this would be cool. But I'll be honest, like how they have it now, it's kind of perfect, especially for the solo experience. I mean, I don't know how it would be for the long term of the party. I mean, you'd have, I'm sure there's a kind of a maybe an upper limit at how much you can do it before it starts maybe getting a little stale, and that's probably why you start swapping jobs and all that stuff. But I'd be a little cautious on adding features or adding something because it might take away from what it already is really good at, right? It's like reinventing the wheel, if you will. I mean, one of the ones that would be kind of cool is just getting kind of better rewards up there. Like now that we've kind of like the community has proven that you can clear on all the jobs. I mean, one thing I've always liked was like maybe a individual title, having the incentive of not just clearing on the one job, but you can clear on all the jobs and get these titles. Also, the one that people always ask is, putting Blue Mage in Deep Dungeon, which I think would be fine. One of the interesting ideas that I was proposing was like I always relate Deep Dungeon to like a roguelike. So if you've played like Hades or something, Binding of Isaac, that kind of it feels like a roguelike with Deep Dungeon. So one of the ideas I had for Blue Mage was, if you put Blue Mage in there right now, it would automatically, you would think it's broken because it has all the spells. Now that they added Basic Instinct, it would feel broken in there. But one of the things I was thinking of was, well, what if you make it in such a way where you walk in on Blue Mage, but you actually have like one spell, that's it. But as you're going through the Deep Dungeon, you are learning the spells from the enemies themselves. Therefore, you eliminate this kind of brokenness of Blue Mage on the outside. It's all encapsulated inside, and it becomes its own game mode within it, which I think would be fantastic. But I imagine that would be extremely difficult to pull off. But it would at least allow this idea of Blue Mage being in a Deep Dungeon, pretty fair and square. You just kind of build it around how you get the enemy, how you get the spells from different enemies. It becomes like a deck building almost, if you will. So I think that would be cool. Because I do personally think if you put Blue Mage in its current iteration, there could be some really weird balance issues, especially if you start adding in more spells once it gets to 80. That gets even more weirder. So who knows?
You're right. I think that's kind of what Blue Mage. That's the highlight of Blue Mage, is learning stuff from mobs. And so if you go in there and the mobs each have this one thing that you can start building on and go forward, and you're like, oh, I got this mob this time, and I got this skill, and then just make it like, I guess, maybe not 100% chance of getting it, but like a high chance of getting the abilities. I don't know. I get what you're saying though, for sure. Ferro?
If anyone speaks Japanese, they should put that on the forums, because that would be honestly one of the coolest things in the game, and very much in the spirit of Blue Mage. Because you don't do too much in the overworld with it, from what I've seen. You do have these little challenges, but that would be like the challenge is, can you get, the lone blue or something title, and something like that would be really cool. Yeah. On rewards, improving rewards, or improving, I don't think anything has to be drastically changed, because I think HOH is very close to solid, and SC is creative enough to have made HOH its own thing while still being in the spirit of Palace, I feel. With its different Palmanders. It's more forgiving Palmanders, but some of the mobs are insane also. They would probably do different Palmanders is what they'll do, and different things like that. For rewards, for those who don't know, there is a tradable mount that you can get in Palace, the Knight Pegasus, which, depending on your server, is probably, if you check the market board for Knight Pegasus, it's probably anywhere from 8 million to 16 million gil on the market board right now, for literally years. And I've said this on stream all the time, like, hey, you guys want to get some gil? You should go into this content, and still it's the same price, so maybe it's gone down a little bit, but people still are, even though I try and hold the gil in front of them, they don't know that so there's 4 different tiers of rewards you get on the floors using intuitions. Intuitions are what let you see the accursed horde. You've probably seen that in the checkpoint. That gives you glam, that gives you a ton of stuff, and there's 4 different tiers of them. And after 150 in Palace, or 71 in HOH, or at 71 and at 151, you start getting the highest tier, which has a chance to drop Knight Pegasus in Palace, or a Dodo, which is a really funny mount, in Heaven on High. Yeah, you can buy them off the market board, so if that spoils it for you and you're not interested in the guild, there's mounts you can... I believe they both have... I can't remember Palace. HOH has a mount that is untradeable, and you can only get it after beating HOH 4 times.
Oh, yeah.
There's Glam that you can only get from there. That's untradeable. Palace has a housing item at the very end of it. It's like a little crystal pumpkin thing. Yeah. And people used to pay 15 million gil to give you housing rights to put that in there. But that's the only way you're supposed to be able to get, is if you've actually cleared it. Untradeable. And that has Glam too. I think Palace also has a mount that's untradeable, but I can't remember how to get it. I don't know if you just spend pot shards. These things also have pot shards, which are used for... Soloers use them to get potions and stuff, or any more than one player who's running without a healer would use those. But those also trade in for emotes and other things. So SC has very much put a lot of rewards, tradable and untradeable. So if I think the only way they could improve it is maybe someone mentioned adding like a glowy weapon, just like ultimates have, like, I guess, reskin an old weapon to be its own thing, because glam visible on your character is really important. You can't mount up in towns and always show off a mount. So I think that's the only thing, is if they added that glam. That's when the sales would start too, though. But I still think it would be really good.
Yeah. Okay. So one other question here, and you had this from you, Angelus, is that world race with a new deep dungeon would be pretty cool. I think there is a lot of interest. I mean, there was interest in the first person to get Necromancer, right? There's interest out there. It's just not as public, I guess.
At first, no, because no one was putting it out there really much. And it was such a drawn out process. I mean, it was like the content released, and it was already like a year and a half, 2 years. No one got it, so it's like, okay, well, and sit around and wait for it, So
yeah. The thing that I would like the most about it is that I'm very invested in the world race for Savage and Ultimate. Is that I wouldn't have to do shit.
Yep.
Because there's already a leaderboard that marks the time and stamp and everything else. And I just, that's I want to see them do that for Savage too, but I understand the difficulties within that. But I do think that it would be awesome.
Aside from I guess like essentially showing your receipts, like you could have the content like, hey, I got this clear, here's a screenshot. Then you could like see the day later to confirm that it's there. Like that's actually kind of cool. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's an idea floating around. I don't know if it's a good idea or bad idea. Someone floated it to Angelus, and I really would like to see it and have it work out without it people getting bored. Would be a competition with a prize or something of soloers. And the thing that's unfortunate is Angelus would probably be the best person to cast it, but he'd probably be competing.
So how would that
kind of?
Would that just be a full day cast, and just if someone loses, they lose? I mean, I think that like if they lose early on or they have bad RNG throughout the race, it's bad, right? And so it's just kind of. I would see. Sorry, I interrupted you, Ferro.
Yeah, the thing that's going to be interesting when it comes out is going to be the what do you say, the unguided prog, because right now a lot of what people use now are from video guides, from written guides, so they're using that for the information. Once it comes out, we're all blank. No one knows anything. I mean, you may have seen the enemies outside, perhaps, but you don't know anything. And I've already conceded. I want to put it out. I want to stream it when that happens or whatever. But I've already conceded that something that I may discover and die to, the very next person could be just 10 floors away and learn from it and then proceed to get the clear thereafter, which is fine. That's okay with me. But stuff like that, like like there is that kind of sense of that feel where people might want to not put their stuff out there until the clear happens, but that's because knowledge is power. So knowing something that could potentially save you from getting in trouble, it's kind of a huge deal with this type of format. So
go ahead, Ferro. Go ahead.
That's kind of like the world race. There's groups that don't stream it, but people still tune in, and whoever is, maybe they don't consider themselves top tier, is still going to do it, and people are there for the ride. And people that won't do it or aren't ready to do it yet will tune in. There's probably a lot of people that would do it in 4, but they would never attempt a solo. They would enjoy it. I think regardless, it would be a neat thing. The game doesn't have that many races, and I think that's one of the few things that is actually a real prog, and it's a really interesting. That would be so hyped to just see a mob you never seen before. Like all the things I did when I did this unguided was, it's nuts when you see 3 new roamers that are, you've never seen them before. What does that do? And then it just blows up, and it's like, okay, let's see, and you hop over to the next stream or whatever. That's exciting.
Now that you're talking about this, it would be interesting because the first 4-person clear was pretty quick, wasn't it?
Probably. I don't know. I had no clue what it was.
I cleared it, I think, on 3rd try with the little group I put together, and we weren't serious. We were just having fun. I think it was 3rd or 4th try we went in, and we got it in like 12 hours.
I'm remembering back to, I can't remember if it was Palace of the Dead or HOH, where Noriko actually got like 15 minutes of fame for her reaction on stream, where she was almost she was like one of the last floors, like 3 floors from clearing it, and then they wiped right before it, and they would have been like the first team to clear it if I remember back. That was so long ago. I don't know. It would be interesting. I think that if it could be done within like a few days, then maybe it is something worth tracking and showing on stream. And the same thing that we do with the other world races, and just put, because that's exciting.
For solo in a few days?
Well, not solo. It would be team.
Okay,
it would have to be team. But you can, solo is like a whole nother. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think Heaven on High got the first clear was 2 weeks after release.
The first solo clear.
Solo clear, yeah.
Yeah.
It's content.
Yeah.
You have droughts, and it's something to prog. But yeah, I don't know if it would work, but a competition for what's already out might be fun. Mm-hmm. Nothing too serious, but like, here's 8 runners. Let's see who gets to the highest floor, or who finishes it first. Experienced soloers, and just kind of teach people who don't know anything about this.
What if all of them lose and don't get there?
Whoever gets to the highest wins.
Okay.
Would be kind of neat. That's basically speedrunning. Speedrunners lose their runs.
Yeah.
And in that case, maybe they'd go, okay, whoever got the furthest wins. They usually finish it out, but this would just be kind of, they're in X place because they died on this floor or whatever.
Are you guys trying to
figure
out ideas? That'll ever happen,
but that would be really cool. Yeah. I would definitely set aside time to watch that or help cast it or something, because that would be. It would seem slow at first, but if someone knows all the tech of what's going on, it would be neat. I think. I don't know if it wouldn't ever be as popular as rating. People would meme on it, but
okay.
To me,
okay, all right, I get it, Ferro, I get it.
Listen to me, Frosty.
I get it, man. On that note, just a complete tangent, there's actually going to be some cool stuff that FaZe Temperance is doing in a few weeks from now. They're going to do a Hell Mode Ultimate, where a whole bunch of teams come together and then they race against each other to clear an ultimate fight with certain conditions imposed upon them. And the first team that gets it gets a cash prize at the end of it. And that's going to happen, and I think it's happening the weekend before the patch that would have had Ultimate if they would have gone forward with it.
I think this game in general is, if people play it a lot, you fall into the category of, I'm going to play something else, or I'm going to figure out how to squeeze more out of this game that I can't stop playing. There's a few psychos like us who just play this game, and you go to play another game and you're like, it's not FF, and you log into FF and you're like, I'm going to invent something to do. And you just do it, and it's like, this is fun because I like this job and I like the game and I'm just used to it and it's comfy. So I think Deep Dungeon is just one of those things.
Yeah. All right. Well, keep going. That's fine.
An ultimate challenge, Deep Dungeon. What would that be? Ori did ultimate with Rock Band drums. You gonna try that, Angelus?
Sometime soon. Not soon. No. Controller would be my first step.
Use a mouse.
Yeah, use a mouse. No, controller would be my first step. Doing a controller.
Too much, but Angelus only plays with a keyboard.
Yeah. He
doesn't play controller, and he doesn't use a mouse. He uses 2 hands on a keyboard and does this.
There's a few people out there like him, but that's like really. I forget what MMO that's from, but there's like a certain. Was it 11 that people did that
11.
on? Yeah.
That's where I came from. I came from F11. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's always just so weird to think about it. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense in my head, but whatever, man. God, I'm just, every time you say that, I just try to process in my head how that movement would even work.
One hand's movement, one hand's the camera.
I guess so, man.
It's like a controller almost.
Yeah.
It's very entertaining to watch, though, because it's not controller and it's not mouse keyboard, so he has his own system and his own muscle memory he's made for it.
Mm-hmm.
There's always the debate of what is the best thing to use, but it's kind of like the the fighting game debate of do you use a controller, do you use an arcade stick, do you use a keyboard? Well, here's 3 really top players that use any of them, so whatever you're good at, you can use.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think this has been like 2 hours 15 minutes so far, which is very impressive. I didn't know if we were going to go that long or not. So it's probably a good time to start winding it down. And I guess I would like to ask you each if there's anything else that we haven't really mentioned about Deep Dungeon that you would want to say or mention on a show, talking about Deep Dungeon before we leave today. And I guess I'll start with you, Ferro. I'll make you go first to be on the spot for that.
Okay, well, soloing seems really scary, but I would highly encourage people. People always say I don't have any friends to do this with it, whatever. I would highly encourage people to get a taste of it and see if they would like it, even if they don't consider themselves raiders or great players, because I've had people who've only done like an extreme here and there, and they've loved it. I've had people who've done savages, they've loved it. Ultimates, they've loved it. It seems like content that actually, if even for a clear or two, a lot of people enjoy. You might not get as addicted to it as me or Angelus, but I would encourage everyone to see it at least once, because Essie put so much work into it.
They did. Okay, Angelus, any last things that you would want to say in regards to Deep Dungeon?
Yeah, I mean, I'd follow up with that. I mean, I mentioned in the beginning, like a lot of the big hurdle for lots of people is just literally getting in there. A lot of people say, "Oh, it looks really hard. Oh, it might take a long time." But that's the funny part about solo, that it is bite-sized. You can go in 10 floors and just do it every day, and you're going in 1 hour at a time. You don't have to sit and do a 6-7 hour session like I do. You don't have to. You can just do it in little bite sizes. But yeah, like step in there, give it a shot. I mean, even if you're on the fence, just give it a shot. And a lot of people who do, they just start doing it and running through it. And it's very convenient in current times because there is so much information out there that you can digest and learn from, and maybe get that confidence just watching someone else be like, oh, well, it was doable, so maybe I can do it too. And that's actually a lot of the premise of lots of people, that they see that it's possible and they're like, oh yeah, I guess I'll just give this a shot and see what happens. And then that's how it kind of rolls into there. But yeah, like one thing I was mentioning, I think last night on stream was this idea of how like if you think of like a TV show, a fan favorite TV show, like, it comes in one season, then get canceled the next season, but then like you have like such a strong community. Sorry, that kind of asks, that kind of puts so much like power and emphasis into the company. Like, no, we really want this show to be here. Can you please put it back in? And I feel like that's where maybe the case of Deep Dungeon is at the moment. That I think if like the community is just kind of being like, we really want Deep Dungeon to happen. Like, can you please get it in? I feel like there might be a little bit of power from the people and the community to maybe push it through and have them really commit to making the content, because people really like it. And seeing all the people coming in now as of recently, and more people getting into it, I think that could be a thing. And it may even come down to the community just continuing to tell them like, yeah, we really like this content and we'd like you to put it in the next one. Maybe they definitely will. So
yeah.
The time seems daunting, but the save feature in theory should make it easy for even casual FCs to do this and have like a Deep Dungeon night together. They have a mount farming night or whatever, and I'm surprised there aren't more casual players that don't raid doing this content. Even savage players aren't doing this content. They don't know what it is, or really. You haven't done this content, Frosty. When are you going to start getting your clears, huh?
Hey, I did some. I've done some. I just haven't gone past much of 50 on Palace of the Dead.
That is not the same Deep Dungeon we're talking about. So the beginning of Deep Dungeon, it is not like that later. We didn't ever mention this, but 150 plus is a completely unique texture of a dungeon, which I know that sounds silly, but it really sets the mood that you're starting to get into these higher floors. 80 plus in HOH is very unique, this temple setting, and it's very exciting to get there the first time, and it actually ramps up really high in difficulty, which isn't a big deal if you have 4 people and you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you just try again, or you have someone that is guiding you guys, and it's really not that bad. The shortcut stuff is nothing like actually climbing, so I would highly encourage. It's not like climbing. You should climb. Try a climb at some point.
Okay. Okay.
Aren't you around the same time Angelus is active? It's active in like 3 hours from now.
Usually, yeah, like on only a couple nights a week. I am like 9 hours a week streamer, part time as the part time gets. So, what I do mostly right now is my dailies to level up my alts. But I mean, I could be doing this stuff instead.
One of your alts that needs XP, take it with Angelus,
Okay.
and you'll get some free levels out of it, and you should probably get it clear with the amount of time you've played the game and the amount of stuff you've covered. It's something to check out, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I am thinking about doing a kind of non-rating night where I'm doing just other stuff that needs to be done, which is maybe other video games too. I don't know. We'll see how it all works out. Don't put this pressure on me, man. I already have to clear ultimates now, and now I gotta clear this, and now I gotta clear,
This is not that bad of an investment.
Okay.
Solo is an investment. With 4 people, pretty chill. Even, I think if you duoed with someone that was good, it would be exciting and challenging. 3 people would be chill.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of the streams, I took my girlfriend and a couple gamers that had never done it before, and we just went to 100. Really, really chill. I just took care of the palmanders and stuff, and it can be casual if you want it to be.
Okay. All right.
That means you're really bad if you haven't done it, Frosty.
Jesus.
How do you feel about that?
Jesus, you're just like ripping me apart, Ferro. All right. Let's wrap up now. And by doing that, I do want both of you to, take a second and just shout out anyone you want to shout out and where people can find you. And I'll start with you again, Ferro. Tell everybody where they can find you and who deserves a shout out.
You guys can find me at Ferro on Twitch, and I have a YouTube channel. There's no HOH content on it. It's just comedy. So if you want to see some memes, it's on there. As for who to shout out, I would like to shout out Angelus Demonus for his YouTube channel and his Twitch, because if you guys haven't seen him when he's doing this, he is constantly talking and narrating everything he's doing. He calls his stream a live tutorial. And I realized there was so much tech to this just because I caught one of his streams, and his clears are on YouTube, and that gives you, when you watch one of those, it starts giving you in depth just how much tech there really is, and that's what really made me stick to this for this time around, because it's always been on and off for me.
Okay, just Angelus, so no other shout outs. That's good. All right.
For the context of this, I don't think I would have even suggested this or been invited on here if I didn't watch his stream, because I realized it was way more interesting than I thought it was.
Okay. Angelus?
That's very nice, bro. Yeah, like I pretty much focus on the stream side, so I'm in 4 days a week. I have a lot of my YouTube stuff are just pretty much my VODs that I just put up on YouTube. But it's been digested by people on YouTube, so that's kind of cool. And I do want to thank. I saw a lot of people from the Deep Dungeon solo community pop into chat, so I thank them for tuning in. Because those guys are great, and they essentially, and Ferro included, and everyone else are the ones that really thought you guys thought it was kind of cool to watch and cool to do, and now we're at this point where we're on MogTalk and we're talking about it and all this fun stuff. So yeah, I mean it's thanks to you guys, because I probably would still be doing this regardless of who's here, but the fact that there's now a community formed around it and it seems like it's growing, that's awesome. So it'll be really fun to see what happens really up until the next one comes out, because it might be even larger than that. And yeah, I can't wait to see what happens. So yeah.
So real quick, there you were mentioning there's a Discord for this as well, right?
Yes, well, there's mine. You can do mine, which mine kind of focuses, my stream Discord does focus a lot on more on the solo ones. There is a bigger one. Let me just put the link here.
Yeah, let me permit you so you don't get banned. There you go.
Okay, one sec.
The big one, I believe, has every data center except Gaia and Mana. So basically every English-speaking data center has 6 data centers.
Okay.
And you can go up and you can LFG and you can ask questions. Angelus is if you want to ask his community or Angelus himself, which is a lot of, I think, soloers. And I think the general DD one is just general. So if you don't if you really don't have an FC or anyone to play with, you could probably find people, even someone to guide you through it, I would assume. Your mileage may vary, of course, in the Deep Dungeon Discord.
Yeah,
if you're on any data center I play on and early in the morning when I'm live, I can bring you through it as well. And I'm sure Angelus, I don't know if he actually brings people through it, but
not usually, but I've done it before. But everyone's so split around the data centers, especially in my Discord, so it gets a little weird. But that's kind of what's cool, is that everyone is just everywhere. But that one I posted in is kind of I guess you can call it the big one, and it is fairly active. The mods there are very creative. They do monthly events that are very interesting and very well thought out. To do, and they get prizes and all that stuff. So they're great in there, and yeah, that definitely would be more catered to the group type to find parties and such. But I would say a lot of the soloers are there also, but we talk so much in my Discord as well. So yeah, welcome to both of them. So check it out.
All right. Well, you guys have been a blast on here talking about Deep Dungeon. I have definitely learned a lot myself, and I hope everyone else watching learned a good bit about it. And I will be doing it at some point. You know, I'll make an effort.
Yes, you will.
I'll make sure. I do want to give my special shout outs to as well, of course, to my wife, who puts up with me doing this every single weekend, Carrara, Andre Kane for the intro and closing music that we have here on the show. A special super big thanks to both Angelus and Ferro for agreeing to come on and do this. Ferro for reminding me I should be doing a Deep Dungeon show just a week ago.
I wanted to watch it. I didn't know I'd be on it.
And Angelus, of course, for being... If you guys don't know, Angelus is my FC leader. So I've known him for quite a while. For being such a stand-up guy and being a part of shows like this.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. And also, thanks for Yoshi P watching the show, of course. You know, I appreciate everything you do, and I know you take our opinions and everything here and apply them to the game afterwards. So, yeah, thanks for that.
I put Deep Dungeon in. Thank you.
We love you. Please add another one in the next expansion. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. And then next week, I am planning another MogTalk. I don't want to go ahead and say exactly what it is. I think, well, I guess I could tell you. My hope is to have a ranged physical show, because we haven't had one in a while, and I think it's a good time to digest a lot of that. Since we're not going to be getting another one in the next expansion, and now that we've kind of settled with Dancer and everything else, it's good to just figure out where we are and where it needs to go in the future. So that may be possible. There could be other things going on. But we also have, you know, a live letter coming up soon. We got the Hell Mode Ultimate coming up soon. We have the Fan Fest. We have so many different things coming up that we're going to be doing on MogTalk. I was looking at my show ideas, and I'm pretty much set for a couple of months, at least with what we can do, which even within this content drought, you know, this stuff exists. I will say this is really far in the future, but sometime at the beginning of June, we are going to have a 2 weeks without MogTalk, because I will be going on a very delayed honeymoon with my wife.
Oh, nice.
2.5 years delayed. But we are both getting vaccinated, and we're going on a trip, because we've never really had a vacation since we started dating that lasted more than 2 days. So we're doing that. But that all being said, I should be streaming as well on Monday. We'll do more Party Finder, because Monday night Party Finder is always a lot of fun. And you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening. We will have a quick short video for my Patreon viewers, just a quick thank you to some of those, and as well as a raid happening right after this. So stick around for those two things, because we will be sending you to somebody soon. Remember, be good, keep cool, stay frosty. Bye, guys! Say bye.
See ya, guys.
Ferro.
Bye.
Okay.
Everyone, hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you so much for watching it. This is my special thanks segment to some of our higher tier Patreon supporters. We do have 2 new people from this week that joined in, which is Uni, who works with a lot of awesome events that happen with PvE. Phase Temperance, if you guys watch this channel, you've probably heard of it at some point. Then there is Nami, who joined as well, who I'm not sure if they're associated with other things. I would love to know that, but they have definitely started supporting us, which I really appreciate it. And of course, there's Dude, it's Antonio, longtime mod of the channel, Tagalong, another wonderful mod who helps with questions and other things that we have going off the channel. Then there's Nimic, who works with the Morning website, great website for PvE content. And then there's Super Miyu, who also works with a website called Teamcraft. If you're interested in anything with crafting, you should check them out. That being said, fairly normal, thank you video. I appreciate everybody watching, and we will be back next week. Remember to be good, keep cool, stay frosty. Bye.